break is boring. Wah, wah, wah. All it does is waste our time and injure our precious club players. Wah, wah, wah. Shut up. I got an idea. How about we abolish club windows? Because they keep disrupting my pure peak entertainment that has been the World Cup qualifiers this year. 2025 for World Cup qualifiers has been incredible, with every month getting more and more intense. So I've decided to compile every review that I've made this year to show the gradual climb of chaos that has unfolded, and also so that I can milk this series. Sorry about it. In Group G, both Poland and Finland collected wins on the first match day. The Poles then made it 6 out of 6 points for the window thanks to a brace by Charlotte FC legend Karol Swiderski. On the other hand, Finland went up 2-0 in just 17 minutes away in Lithuania. However, the Lithuanians would respond with 2 of their own, including an absolute banger from none other than Gyvydas Ginėtis. So as a result, Poland currently lead the group with Finland just behind them, followed by Lithuania in third. The Netherlands had the Nations League, so they didn't play this window, and for future reference, this will be the case for Austria, Italy, Belgium, Serbia, and also Croatia. And maybe this is extremely premature, but Lithuania? That draw versus Finland, very impressive. And they also held off Poland until the 80th minute. Am I really right now hyping up a team to overachieve and finish third? Yes. Welcome to international football. Group H also began, and I guess I was wrong about Bosnia. 2 wins to begin the campaign, including a 1-0 win away versus who I thought had a good chance to finish second, Romania. Romania did bounce back, beating San Marino 5-1, which sees them up in second, tied on points with Cyprus, who also defeated the San Marinis. Over to Group I, and Norway was hosting a barbecue this window. 2 wins and 9 goals scored. Maybe this is finally their year. Behind them is Estonia of all teams, who defeated Moldova in a 5-goal thriller, and tied on points with them is the team that beat them. Group J, Wales and North Macedonia start well with wins in their respective openers. They then played each other 3 days later, and a Welsh mistake in the back led to a North Macedonia winner in the first minute of stoppage time. Or so we thought. Through pure irony, Wales embraced Brexit, and who else but Mr. Clutch himself, Harry Wilson, to save Cymru in the 6th minute of stoppage time. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan bounces back versus Liechtenstein, which sees them just behind the top 2. On to the War Crimes group. England, without lifting a finger, earned 2 victories to start the campaign. Meanwhile, a team experiencing the polar opposite was Andorra, who had its dentures and cane stolen from them by the Latvians and Albanians. So at the end of March, England hold the top spot with 6 of 6 points, while Albania just narrowly sit in second because of their slightly better goal difference over Latvia. Lastly, we saw the Faroe Islands and Group L representing well for Group L. In all fairness to the Faroe Islands, they equalized late on versus Czechia, but were unlucky to concede just 2 minutes later. They then missed out on another point after conceding to Montenegro in the 5th minute of stoppage time. Looking at the table after 2 games though, the top 2 is currently Czechia, followed by Montenegro, who both earned 6 of 6 points this window. On to Asian qualifiers, and there are just 4 games remaining. In Group A, Iran held a 3-point lead above Uzbekistan, who are trying to qualify for their first ever World Cup. But they'll have to be wary of the UAE, who got some very impressive results last time out, including a 5-0 beatdown of Qatar. Qatar is also still in the fight with 7 points, but it's more likely they end up advancing to the 4th round. Meanwhile, the bottom 2 of Kyrgyzstan and North Korea will need to pick up the pace to avoid elimination. Uzbekistan are coming just that bit closer to the dream as they collect a win versus Kyrgyzstan to start March. Iran are even closer though, after they scored 2 past UAE, including a goal in the 27th minute of stoppage time. Meanwhile, Qatar, actually no, Akram Afif makes a statement to Asia that simply says, "You can't count us out yet, we haven't even entered our final form." Unfortunately for our most legitimate Asian Cup winners ever, they dropped the balls just 3 days later and lost to Kyrgyzstan. It looked like the UAE would also fumble as well, but they found a winner in the 7th minute of stoppage time and in the process eliminate the North Koreans. Despite the win though, the UAE actually sacked head coach Paulo Bento afterwards. Then we had Iran versus Uzbekistan. Winner would go on to the World Cup. 15 minutes played, the Uzbeks get on the board, and that dream is getting more and more within their grasp. However, Mehdi Taremi with an explosive strike responds in the second half. But just 2 minutes later, an Uzbekistan free kick somehow finds its way through the crowd and into the back of the net. 73 minutes played, a chance now for the Uzbeks to seal the deal and book their ticket for 2026, but the Iranian keeper denies them. And they really should have taken advantage of that opportunity, because just 10 minutes later, Iran scrap an equalizer. In the end, the result stands at 2-2, which officially sees Iran qualify for their 4th straight tournament. Uzbekistan, who are more than likely to claim this spot, need just 1 more win to do so. so. But they still have to play the UAE, who still have a chance of stealing the spot away. That said, sacking your coach with 2 games remaining, something that is genuinely more impressive than Indonesia, doesn't really give them much of a good chance. And then there's the battle for the last spot to the 4th round between Qatar and Kyrgyzstan. Qatar still have to play Uzbekistan, while Kyrgyzstan still has to play the UAE. I'm gonna be honest, this has nothing to do with the countries in this group, but every single time I have to cover Group B, I sigh in dread. My brain sighs in dread. Me in a past life sighs in dread. Because I don't know, I just don't really look forward to this group. The only thing I actually look forward to is just like Palestine, that's about it. Anyways, in Group B, we have an uninspiring South Korea at the top, with an Iraq side that only sees goals from Ayman Hussein, 3 points below them. In third, you got Kuwait, who, if they just stopped fucking it up versus Kuwait, would probably be in first, probably. And in fourth, you got Oman. Actually, I take it back. There is one country in this group that I have a personal vendetta against. Finally, you got Kuwait and Palestine, who still are within a single result of taking 4th spot. Let the games begin. Kang-in Lee with an erotic through ball finds Hwang Hee-chan, and South Korea go up early versus Oman, only for the Korean defense to resemble what it would look like if BTS actually went to war and Oman steal a point away. That's not the only upset though. Winless Kuwait stun everyone, going up 2-0 versus second place Iraq by the 70th minute. However, Iraq would make an insane comeback, starting with Akam Hashim's bolt from far out in the 3rd minute of stoppage time, and then a goal from Ibrahim Bayesh in the 11th minute of stoppage time. A good result in the grand scheme of things for Iraq, but an even better one for Jordan, who go back into second with a win. The Jordanians then got a draw in Seoul to finish the window with a solid 4 points. Ayman Hussein once more finds the back of the net for Iraq, this time versus Palestine. However, Palestine respond with 2 straight goals from corners in the last minutes of the game to make history, winning their first ever 3rd round qualifier. More importantly, they're still alive with 2 games remaining. And let's look at that table, shall we? Because it's gotten a lot more exciting. South Korea and Jordan once more hold on to the top spots. Both teams are guaranteed at least the 4th round. Iraq is a single point behind Jordan in 3rd, and these two play on the final day of the next window. That could genuinely see fireworks. Iraq hasn't seen the World Cup since '86, and Jordan are seeking to be more popular on Google than that one gambler. Oman's solid window also sees them with a slight chance to take an automatic spot, while Palestine and Kuwait are still in the fight, but they will need to pray Oman doesn't get a single win in the last 2 match days. And then we have my favorite group. Outside of Japan, who have been absolutely dominant in this group, literally everyone else is within a single point of each other. But it was Australia holding on to the other automatic spot, with Indonesia just behind them, and these two would play this month. And God continues to punish me, as Indonesia has a penalty, and oh my god, they actually missed it. My night though was only getting started. 10 minutes later, the Aussies showed these Dutch frauds how to score a penalty, and then they became absolutely ruthless. This was the greatest hate watch for me in quite some time. These motherfuckers naturalized like 10 players before the game, their fans were talking so much shit about how they would easily beat Australia, and now look at them. 5-1. King Indo, baby! Clear it in! Japan bagged another win after scoring twice against Bahrain, and that actually saw them become the first nation to qualify for the World Cup. I was also invited to a watch party by the JFA located in Tokyo to witness this, and that was really cool. Saudi Arabia end a 3-game winless run with a win versus China, and then they get a draw with a Japanese side who genuinely couldn't care less what the result was. Meanwhile, Aussies were loving Tony Popovich as the nation brings home another W versus China, and I just know Uni Life lost his will to live after seeing that. The Dutch East Indies unfortunately bounced back with a win versus Bahrain thanks to Dutch player number 900, whose Indonesian descent comes from his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandma. But now looking at the table, things look a little more spread out. Australia was the only team to win both their games this time out, and as a result, they hold second with a slightly bigger gap than before. But that spot is far from decided. Australia still has to play Japan, and then they also play 3rd place Saudi Arabia on the final match day. Indonesia still has a chance to automatically qualify, unfortunately, but they would probably have to win both their games, which includes an away day in Japan. Bahrain and China are both tied on points at the bottom, and in a perfect world, they would win their second to last games, and then fight each other for who gets to break Indonesia's hearts, but at this point, I'm just writing fanfic. Either way, the last 2 match days of the Asian qualifiers in June should be really fun to watch. Also, I know I show a lot of hate towards Indonesia, and it only seems to be growing even more because their fandom is like the Turkey of AFC, but that's just football. Outside, we are still brothers and sisters of this shit show of a region. Recently, the government of Indonesia passed laws that would provide the military more influence in the government. Indonesia has a lot of issues when it comes to freedom of speech, police brutality, and struggles with democracy, and this only makes things so much worse. Because of these laws, and also even more beyond that, there have been protests recently, and there have been people who have gotten injured, arrested, and even have gone missing. So the best thing we can do is raise awareness and tell the masses, especially with the government trying to silence people online right now. Sweet home South America. Argentina sit atop with a chance to qualify this month. Meanwhile, from 2nd place Uruguay to 6th place Paraguay is a dogfight. The gap from that pack to 7th widened a bit because of Paraguay's fine form as of recent, and that spot is held by the Altitude Alphas Bolivia. Behind them is Venezuela, who held a really promising start to qualifiers, but since the end of Copa America, they've snapped back to reality. Finally, there's Chile and Peru, who have been so ass that I think we really should just send them to OFC. March started in classic South American fashion. Single late goal scored by Paraguay, and then with time expiring, that one corner tactic we all love and hate causes an all-out brawl. However, with final time, Paraguay extend their impressive unbeaten run to 7 now. Brazil have been struggling a lot throughout these qualifiers, but life in March began well as they scored an early penalty versus Colombia. However, a mistake in the back and some static defending leads to Brazil giving away their promising start not even before half time. But then in the 8th minute of stoppage time, Vinny Jr. actually does something for the national team, and Seleção steal away a very valuable 3 points, and Colombia on the other hand have now lost 3 consecutive qualifiers. Peru get their most convincing win of the qualification campaign with a 3-1 victory versus the Sea Level Merchants. Since bringing in a new head coach back in August, Ecuador has only been on the up, and thanks to an Enter Valencia brace, they also go 7 games unbeaten. Also, if someone could tell me why the broadcast looked like it was filmed in the 90s, that'd be great. Over to Argentina versus Uruguay, Thiago Almada would finish a work of art, and that goal was enough to see the Argentines earn all 3 points. Oh yeah, there was also a red in this game, and ooh. Yeah, he probably won't remember tonight. Into matchday 14, things just continue to not go Uruguay's way, as they literally struggle to breathe up in the Andes and draw with Bolivia. However, this result is quite significant because that officially sees Argentina qualify for World Cup 2026. No doubts now that they will have the opportunity to defend their title in the urban sprawls of Liberty. Having gone ice cold like the Houston Rockets in Game 7 of the 2018 Western Conference Finals, Colombia needed something, and they converted their desperation into an electrifying 2-0 start versus Paraguay. But Gustavo Alfaro would not see his team go down without a fight. Paraguay bring it within 1 right before the half. And then in the 61st minute, Julio Enciso scores yet another absolutely ridiculous goal, and Paraguay come back from 2-0 down to keep their streak alive. You ever notice how Gustavo Alfaro kind of looks like Franklin D. Roosevelt? Meanwhile, the post-Copa America form has seemingly claimed yet another victim. In their last 4 games, Colombia has 1 draw and 3 losses. Only 4 matches to go, guys. Please don't let 2022 happen again for the sake of your fans. Venezuela finally break their post-Copa America winless run with a single goal versus the Peruvians. Prior to a massive bout between rivals Brazil and Argentina, Rafinha said in an interview that Brazil would beat Argentina on and off the pitch, and capped it off with a short and sweet, "We will fuck them." He then proceeded to be as non-existent as Brazil's chances to win next year, and Argentina absolutely humiliated their rivals 4-1. And this prompted the Brazilian FA to finally pull the plug on head coach Dorival Jr. Finally, to cap off March, Ecuador and Chile played out a 0-0 draw. So with 4 games remaining, 1 ticket to North America has been officially claimed. Meanwhile, the tension between 2nd place and 6th has only grown more. Ecuador earned 4 points over Uruguay's 1, so they hop into 2nd. And that now leaves a 3-way tie between Uruguay, Brazil, and Paraguay. Colombia, who were once the hottest team on the planet, are once again surprising everyone for all the wrong reasons. And Ice Age, since their loss in the final of the Copa America, now sees the Colombians flirting with danger in the last automatic spot. The playoff spot has changed hands once again, as Venezuela's 1 win this window was enough to see them climb up to 7th. Bolivia's form has taken a dive since their 6-0 loss to Argentina, however, they are still within a point of the playoff spot. Also, even though they've been the 2 worst countries to watch in this campaign, Peru and Chile are hanging in the fight just 5 points from 7th. African qualifiers returned for the first time in almost a year. Group A saw Egypt in the automatic qualification spot with 10 points. Then you had a pretty close race between the 3 teams for the playoff spot, which at the time was held by Guinea-Bissau. Egypt collects 6 of 6 points with ease in this window. Second place Guinea-Bissau, on the other hand, did an absolutely terrible job of protecting their spots as they lost to both Sierra Leone and Burkina Faso. And with Burkina Faso also beating Djibouti for another 3 points, that now sees them in the playoff spot. The gap between second and the rest has stretched out a little bit, but there's still plenty of games to go. Sudan had a grasp of Group B, and 2 points behind them was the Senegal side struggling to get started up. The top 2 played to begin March, and that match ended in a 0-0 draw. Senegal went on to win their other game versus Togo, and Sudan conceded a last-minute equalizer to South Sudan. Meanwhile, DR Congo win both of their games and move from 3rd to 1st this window. Just within a whisker away from them though is 2nd place Senegal and 3rd place Sudan, who are tied on points. Group C before March was pretty interesting. There was a 3-way tie with Rwanda at the top, and of course the funniest part of this group, Nigeria being in 5th. However, the Nigerians were finally able to get a win versus Rwanda with their new head coach, only to then concede a last-minute equalizer from Zimbabwe. And this was the breaking point for the Nigerians, as after the game, Victor Osimhen was very upset. Anyways, let's talk about good teams now. South Africa. They seek their first World Cup appearance since 2010 when they hosted, and it's looking pretty promising as they win both of their games this month. And because Rwanda and Benin only got 1 point this window, the South Africans are now in first with a 5-point cushion. The playoff battle, on the other hand, is still very much anyone's for the taking, with even last place Zimbabwe within 4 points. Over to Group B, and it was another close one. Cameroon was top. A point behind them was Libya and Cape Verde. And in 4th, 2 points away, was Angola. And right off the bat, there was potential for a shakeup as Cameroon failed to score versus 159th ranked in the world Eswatini. This opened the door for Libya, who scored against Angola with 15 minutes remaining. But then, the keeper decided to misjudge a free kick in the final minutes of the game. So now it was up to Cape Verde, and while he definitely didn't mean that shit at all, that doesn't matter because Cape Verde are now in the automatic qualification spot. And they made sure it stayed that way at the end of the window after beating Angola 2-1. Going back to our other 2 friends though, Cameroon comfortably beated Libya 3-1. So now looking at the table, Cape Verde, a nation with 500,000 people, has a chance to qualify for the World Cup for the first time ever. But don't get too excited because Cameroon are just 1 point behind them and will play the leaders in June. Libya and Angola are still in the fight for the playoff spot, but it'll take masterclasses on their ends and some luck. In Group B, we already saw 1 team withdraw before, and now we're seeing another depart because FIFA decided to suspend Congo. So as a result, this group only saw a game if it involved Morocco in it. The Atlas Lions won both, so yeah, that's that, I guess. However, at least Group F still had all of its teams though. Before the window, Ivory Coast, who haven't seen the World Cup since 2014, were at the top. Gabon were just behind them in the playoff spot with other contenders for second including Burundi and Kenya. The Ivorians maintained their lead with 2 straight 1-0 wins, and Gabon did well to keep their form up with wins for Seychelles and Kenya. Speaking of the Seychelles, they unfortunately had to face a pissed off Burundi side that had just narrowly lost to Ivory Coast. But now looking at the table, nothing changes at the top, but the gap between 2nd place Gabon and 3rd place Burundi has now widened to 5 points. Group G was being held down by Algeria and Mozambique of all teams, while the rest of the pack, excluding Somalia's finished ass, were within 3 points of the top 2. Both Algeria and Mozambique started the window with some solid victories. They then played each other 3 days later, and Algeria made it very clear who was in charge of this group. Meanwhile, in the middle of the pack, Guinea continued to disappoint as they couldn't even beat Somalia at home. Guys, you have Girassi, how do you even pull this off? Uganda actually went 1 step further and beat Guinea, and the other team to have at least 1 win was Botswana. So looking at the table, Algeria holds a 3-point lead in the automatic spots, and Mozambique sits 2nd with Botswana and Uganda not too far away. Only 4 points separated 1st and 4th after 4 games in Group H. Leaders Tunisia carried on their good form with wins versus Liberia and Malawi. 2nd place Namibia hold on to their position after earning 4 points this window. Despite the loss to Tunisia, Liberia are still in 3rd after beating Sao Tome and Principe. Actually, the only team to climb up in this group was the AFCON merchants Equatorial Guinea, who had a pretty solid window collecting 4 points. Lastly, we had Group I, which was led by the goddamn Comoros out of every team. But that wasn't the only surprise of this window, because you also had that one country they named after a movie 2 points away in 3rd.
Welcome to Madagascar.
And that was because Mali were somehow more underwhelming than Ghana. I guess I spoke too soon. Ghana began their window destroying Chad and then finished it off with a comfortable win versus Madagascar, which meant we now had a new leader at the top. The guys who failed to qualify for next year's AFCON. Comoros now find themselves in the playoff spot 3 points behind. In this window, they were at least able to get a bounce back win. Same for Madagascar, who actually keep third because guess what? Nothing changed. Mali are still shit. We were officially into the final round of OFC qualifiers, and 4 teams remain in the fight for a trip to North America. Those teams are New Zealand, Fiji, Tahiti, and New Caledonia. By the way, I was just a little bit curious and looked up what a flight from New York all the way to New Caledonia would look like. It's hell. If you were to ever think of going on such an endeavor, be prepared to either be in a plane or airport for over 25 hours. Hell, it could be over 64 hours. Surely the 64-hour one is a little bit cheaper though, right? No, it's $3,000. Anyways, the format is very simple. 2 semifinal matches and 1 final. And the winner of the final, you guessed it, qualifies for the World Cup. We kicked off with New Caledonia versus Tahiti, and it would be a chip over the keeper from Gopfenepej to give New Caledonia the lead after 50 minutes. Into the last 20 minutes, however, Tahiti with a free kick get free of the defense, but the ball goes narrowly wide. And just to put more salt in the wound, Gopfenepej does this shit just 2 minutes later. I'd be sick to my stomach, man. God damn. Louis Waya then added one more for good measure, and New Caledonia take easy care of Tahiti to move on to the final. Then there was New Zealand versus Fiji, and to the shock of absolutely no one, the All Whites eviscerated their victims with a Chris Wood hat-trick as a cherry on top. And so it came down to the final, New Zealand versus New Caledonia, and holy shit, it's that flag! New Caledonia had a commendable effort, but in the end it was no match for the bulldozer of Oceania, and New Zealand with a 3-0 win in front of their fans qualify for the World Cup for the first time since World Cup 2010. Chris Wood was the youngest player in that squad at just 18, and now he will be back as the leading scorer of his nation at 34. But the story is not over for New Caledonia. Their fate will be decided next year during the Intercontinental Playoffs. We'll first start off with CONMEBOL, because things are so damn close with only 4 games to go. Excluding Argentina, who have already qualified, from the highest automatic spot of 2nd to the first spot outside of any qualification of 8th is a gap of just 7 points. Of the teams still in contention, 5th place Paraguay are the only ones to be unbeaten since the end of Copa America last July. They extended their run right from the get-go with a 2-0 win versus Uruguay, and after doubts of even finishing in the playoff spot back in October 2024, Paraguay find themselves just a bit closer to automatically qualifying for the World Cup.
Buen dia.
A little bit later, the world would witness Carlo Ancelotti's managerial debut in international football, as his Brazil would face a promising Ecuadorian golden generation led by Mason Mount in a wig. This could turn out to be an absolute classic. Barely had to even lift a finger to beat an absolutely shambolic Chile side. Over to Colombia, Luis Diaz was suspended for their first game, and that was a huge loss for El Cafeteros as their finishing went from subpar to absolutely non-existent. Colombia had 15 shots in this game, and not a single one was on target. Finally, to finish off this match day was a battle between playoff spot holders Venezuela and 8th place Bolivia. Just 1 point separated these two very hungry nations that have been able to hold their own in such a grueling campaign. For us World Cup qualifier sickos, this could turn out to be a real classic. 25 minutes later, Solomon Rondon doubled the lead, and Venezuela would go on to win 2-0 and extend the gap to 4 points. But this is CONMEBOL qualifiers. Nothing is set in stone until the final whistle of the final match day. And even then, it still isn't. In Bolivia's next game, they once again call upon a young duckling who has come up big numerous times in their campaign. The Seoul Altitude Alpha himself, Miguel Terceros. He creates another moment of brilliance, putting the Bolivians up 1-0 after just 5 minutes. Now shining brighter than the sun these fans could practically touch from this altitude, Terceros blinds the keeper into a mistake, and Bolivia closed this game off with another young talent. And with Venezuela losing to Uruguay, everything returns to the way it was as the gap shrinks to 1 point once again. Just above them is 6th place Colombia, who are as vulnerable as they've ever been in this campaign because of their ongoing 5-game winless streak. Not exactly great going into an away game in Argentina. But like Bolivia, Colombia called upon their savior, Luis Diaz.
You could not live with your own failure. Where did that bring you? Back to me.
After being absent for their first game, Colombia's king single-handedly brings back the national team's attacking threat. And more, as in the 24th minute, the Liverpool forward dribbles past 1, 2, 3, 4, and before you can even comprehend what you've just witnessed, he puts it past Emi Martinez. A-R-T. Unfortunately though, the defense could not hold off Argentina's fronts forever, and Colombia would have to settle for a third straight draw. Carlo Ancelotti finally gets his first win as a head coach of Brazil, and it's a big one as he puts an end to Paraguay's 9-game unbeaten run. And because of Venezuela and Bolivia's shenanigans this month, this actually locks Brazil into the big dance. Yes, after all this shit we talked and will continue to talk, Brazil still qualified for the World Cup with 2 games to spare. Speaking of which, Ecuador also booked their ticket to North America next year after a 0-0 draw with Peru. That leaves just 3 automatic spots and 1 playoff spot left to claim with just 1 more window left to determine it. Thanks to their wins, both Uruguay and Paraguay can't be eliminated from this phase of qualifiers, but mathematically they can still fall into the playoff spots. Uruguay has only won 2 qualifiers since last July, but their last 2 opponents are 9th and 10th place, so they should be okay. Paraguay, it's a little tougher, with Ecuador at home and then Peru away. But even if these 2 fail to collect any points, Venezuela earning 6 of 6 points next window has less of a chance of happening than the Washington Wizards winning more than 20 games next season. You'll see why. Current playoff holders Venezuela have a 1-point cushion between them and 8th place Bolivia. It does help their chances that their goal difference is way better though. For both of these teams, realistically looking for a second chance to qualify for the World Cup either for the first time since 1994 or ever, it's gonna be really tough. Venezuela's last 2 games are Argentina away and rivals Colombia at home. Mano tengo fe, I guess. On the other hand, Bolivia's last 2 games see them facing Colombia away and then Brazil at home. Now, by the off chance that these 2 shit the bed, which is likely, 9th place Peru still has a chance if they can win both their games by multiple goals, which is not very likely. Oh yeah, didn't really know where to put this, but 10th place Chile were officially eliminated by Bolivia, so I'll let the editor deal with them. Back to 6th place Colombia though, they still have the possibility of missing out entirely, but that's only if they fail to earn a single point in September. Their last 2 games are Bolivia at home and Venezuela away. As long as Luis Diaz doesn't die, I think they're good. Oh yeah, one more thing. The first match day of June saw 0 red cards. The East has officially stolen our beautiful CONMEBOL. However, in the second match day, we saw 4 red cards. One was just a silly yellow, one guy got Xabi Alonso'd in Bolivia, Chile. In the same game, someone didn't even attempt to go for the ball on this tackle. And finally in Argentina, Colombia, Enzo Fernandez kicked a guy in the face. Vintage CONMEBOL. Over to Asia now, where each team played their last matches of this round. In Group A, Iran had already qualified in the previous window, meaning next year will be their 4th straight appearance. It also means that their coach, who doesn't know what he's doing and refuses to play anyone above the age of 30, is still in charge. Anyways, Uzbekistan with their 0-0 draw versus the UAE saw them qualify for the World Cup for the first time ever, a big moment for the whole nation and Central Asian football. And for this amazing achievement, the government gifted each player a new car. Meanwhile, the UAE are gifted with another chance. Nothing new there. A single point was enough to clinch one of the 2 spots in the 4th round, and Qatar would seal the other thanks to their 1-0 win versus Iran and a 2-all draw between 5th and 6th. Over to Group B, mathematically speaking, any of the teams in the top 4 could have automatically qualified at the beginning of this month. Even better, they would play each other to begin this month. South Korea, despite their flaws and troubles throughout the campaign, beat Iraq to qualify, while Jordan would make easy work of Oman to clinch and become the 2nd Asian team this window to make history and qualify for their first ever World Cup. A tough pill for Iraq to swallow after how narrowly they missed out, but they at least managed to lock in a 4th round spot after a statement victory away in Jordan to close off the window. Oman was hoping to secure a second chance too, but so was an even hungrier Palestine side, who wanted nothing more than to appear on the world stage in front of the very leader who plans to wipe every Palestinian in Gaza off the planet for a resort. Needing to win both of their games to stay alive, Palestine beat Kuwait in their first fixture of the month. Then in the 48th minute versus Oman, Odai Korubs got Palestine dreaming big as he scores his first ever goal for his country. However, in the dying minutes, the referee gets a call from Netanyahu himself and punishes Palestine for the most blatant dive I've ever seen in my life. The wild thing is this shit went to VAR and still was deemed a penalty. Anyways, just like that, heartbreak for Palestine, absolute relief for Oman, who just barely finish in the other 4th round spot. Finally, in Group C, with Japan already qualified, this left one more automatic spot for this round. And current holder 2nd place Australia wasted no time making sure that shit was theirs at the end of the window. They beat a bunch of Japanese teams with a last minute winner at home and then came back from 1-0 down away in Saudi Arabia to shithouse yet another World Cup qualification. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia, thanks to a win versus Bahrain, will have a second chance in the 4th round, as will Indonesia, unfortunately, after their 1-0 win versus China. At least I got to hate watch them versus Japan, I guess. Back to the region, where because of the Nations League, everything is gonna get progressively more confusing with every window. Once again, the first 6 groups have still yet to kick a ball, so we will start this with Group G. Poland was on top of the group to begin June, with Finland not too far away. The two played each other in Helsinki, and Finland would prevail with a 2-1 win that sees them dethrone the Poles. For Poland, this was their only qualifier of the window, and yet still, this was the most eventful June of any other team in this group. It all started when Robert Lewandowski wasn't called up this month after he told the head coach he was too exhausted from his season with Barcelona. A few days later, the head coach then announced Piotr Zielinski as the new captain. Lewandowski felt betrayed by this and vowed to never play for the national team again so long as this head coach was in charge. And as this is Poland's all-time leading scorer by a country mile, this was practically a death sentence, and after Poland's loss to Finland, the head coach resigned in shame. Also, remember when I hinted at some Lithuanian hype for absolutely no reason?
We don't talk about that.
Also, the Netherlands finally began their World Cup 2026 campaign, and in style, as they beat Finland away and then gave their former PM a nice sending off by kicking down Malta 8-0. The joke is, your prime minister's name is Dick Schoof. Or at least, that was the prime minister, I guess. So after the month of June, Finland currently lead Group G with 7 points, but that doesn't really mean much as the Dutch with 2 games in hand are already a point below the Finns. Poland will hope a new head coach brings some better success because, while still early, they sit right outside the playoff spot. Over in Group H, Bosnians were in disbelief that they no longer had to hold on to their 2014 success like it was a man thinking he actually had a chance with his rental girlfriend. And thanks to 90-year-old Edin Dzeko, the Bosnians remain top of the group after winning their only game of the window versus San Marino.
I just want to say that I'm proud to be Bosnian. One old man with a county jail. What's on that city starting to be?
Just like the Dutch though, the Austrians finally got their qualification campaign up and running. They made easy work of who everyone thought would be a lock for the playoffs, and then capped off the window by bagging 4 goals in the first 30 minutes versus San Marino, and then pulling off a football respect moments number 874 by having mercy afterwards. The only other team to get a result was Romania, who managed a 2-0 win versus Cyprus. So after these games, Bosnia, as mentioned before, are still in the automatic spot, while Austria and Romania are just behind tied on points, but both teams are in completely different situations. Austria has a game in hand, and Romania has already played 4 times. Group I started with a banger as Italy began their qualification run versus Norway, and in a matter of 42 minutes, the Norwegians put 3 past the Italians. Just a reminder, the next video essay is about Italy. Gliazzurri was able to bounce back and beat Moldova, but even that wasn't a very convincing victory, as Moldova had 18 shots with 34% of the possession. These 2 results were enough to see Luciano Spalletti relieved of his head coaching duties. Italy's hopes now lay in the hands of oh no.
Sometimes maybe she.
Going back to Norway though, the promised golden generation seems to no longer be some Nordic folktale. With a win versus Estonia, Norway continue their dominance in Group I with 4 wins, 0 draws, and 0 losses. Next we go to Group J, where June had the table looking pretty damn tight, albeit after just 2 games. But none of that mattered anymore because the butcher had finally arrived. Belgium. Against first place North Macedonia, they set the tone for their campaign early on, and then conceded the equalizer in the 86th minute. No worries though, the Belgians in their next game would absolutely torch Wales with 3 goals in the first 28 minutes, and then concede 3 unanswered. Angel made a whole ass song about this capital, and this is how you repay her? Fortunately for Belgium, they still have the guy who hates international football with all his soul, and he saves the national team from another embarrassment. For Wales, this was a fantastic fight considering this team is still suffering from shell shock after the retirement of Gareth Bale. But they'll at least be happy to finish the month with 3 points after a win versus Liechtenstein. Meanwhile, North Macedonia continue to impress so far. Along with their draw with Belgium, they beat Kazakhstan away and as a result are still top with 8 points. Just behind them is Wales in the playoff spot, while Belgium will hope to get things running smoother in the coming months with their 2 games in hand. Group K next, and England would continue their reign at the top after winning their only game of the month versus Andorra. A little bit alarming since it was just a 1-0 result against Andorra, but to be fair, it is still early days for Thomas Tuchel. But who cares about England? No one was waiting for England in June. Everyone was waiting for something even better. Albania versus Serbia. And when it came to the pre-match pettiness, this shit did not disappoint. In these types of competitions, FIFA requires that both flags be displayed in the stadium, but never mentioned anything about the size of the flags.
That's pretty average. I don't know what that's normal size.
Then, the Albanian mascots did nationalistic eagle symbols during Serbia's anthem. And speaking of that anthem, finally though, it was time for kickoff. And this shit was so ass. You know, in all fairness, I do feel like the players were probably fearing for their lives. One wrong tackle, one wrong dribble, you know, any kind of gesture. We could have seen scenes of like 2014 again, so you know, I get it. Anyways, Albania would finish off the month with a disappointing draw versus Latvia, while Serbia's Alexander Mitrovic single-handedly destroyed Andorra. So at the end of June, England are in prime position to automatically qualify. Albania currently sits in the playoff spot, but 1 point behind them with 2 games in hand are their bitter rivals. These two will play each other again in October. Also, Latvia is still in the mix, but I wouldn't really get my hopes up if I were you. And finally, to round off Europe, Group L, which had the top 2 in Czechia and Montenegro battle it out, with Czechia taking the title of King of the Hill. But little did they know, they were in for one rude awakening. Quite honestly, everyone was. Just when you thought it was over for this Croatian generation, they find new ways to prove us all wrong. They annihilated Gibraltar 7-0 and then had multiple players 33 or older put 5 past the so-called group leaders Czechia. Czechia are still in pole position after what had been done to them, but Croatia are just below them licking their chops with 2 games in hand. Tied on points with them is Montenegro, who only played once, and just hanging in there is the Faroe Islands after they collected their first win of the campaign versus Gibraltar. Lastly, we got CONCACAF, who just finished up their second round. In Group A, Honduras won out their remaining fixtures to advance to the next round. Cuba were looking like the ones to advance alongside Honduras, but then out of absolutely nowhere, Bermuda, who started with 1 point this window, pillaged the Cayman Islands and then dropped an RKO on Cuba's World Cup hopes to advance. Group B saw Costa Rica and Trinidad in the top 2. Costa Rica maintained their position with wins versus the Bahamas and Trinidad, while Trinidad just narrowly advanced by a goal difference after beating St. Kitts and Nevis. Group C had Haiti and Curacao level on points, but in terms of quality, this could not be farther from the truth. Curacao destabilized an already unstable Haiti 5-1 to get into the 3rd round. Thankfully for the Haitians though, everyone else was significantly more ass, so they advanced nonetheless. In Group D, Panama won their group without breaking a sweat, and Nicaragua was able to move into the next round with them after beating 3rd place Guyana. Group B was won by a Jamaican side led by Steve McLaren. I'd pay large sums of cash to hear that man say bomboclat. They beat the Virgins of Britain and then closed off the group with 4-4 wins versus 2nd place Guatemala. Guatemala took care of their only competition to start June, so they also move on as well. Finally, Group F. The Indonesia of CONCACAF was in first, with surprise guest Puerto Rico rounding off the top 2. They played each other to start the month, with Suriname grabbing all 3 points and a spot in the next round. This opened the door for El Salvador to take second, which they did after beating Anguilla 3-0. But there was still a chance for Puerto Rico on the final day. They just needed to win and see El Salvador lose to Suriname, who have already qualified. That's tough. We start with the absolute dogfight going on near the cut line of South American qualifiers. Argentina, Ecuador, and Brazil have already qualified, which left just 3 more automatic spots and a place in the playoffs remaining. 4th place Uruguay hadn't been in the best form as of late, but was able to book a ticket after being a Peruvian side that hasn't scored an away goal since 2022. Meanwhile, in Asunción, the streets were full of people dancing, and the city was ablaze in a patriotic fireworks show because after a 0-0 draw with South America's newest terrorist organization, Paraguay were officially returning to the World Cup for the first time since 2010. Again, this team was as low as 7th in the qualifiers with just 1 win in 6 games. To go from that to just 1 loss in your next 11 games to qualify for the whole thing automatically, that's so impressive. Gustavo Alfaro, all I'm gonna say is get ready to learn liver failure, because you will be granted free alcohol at every bar in Paraguay for all of eternity. All Colombia needed to do was win one game to avoid the catastrophe that they saw in 2022. Which sounds pretty straightforward and all, but then you have to remember Los Cafeteros were on a 6-game winless streak going into this. But no worries, their next opponents were the Sea Level Merchants, and Colombia produced a convincing 3-0 win which saw James Rodriguez become the country's leading scorer in World Cup qualifiers. This would also be an emotional ending for James, who was playing his last ever home game in a Colombian shirt. But he wasn't the only one to bid farewell to his home fans. Ener Valencia in his last home game said goodbye with a goal versus Argentina, and Lionel Messi, with the knowledge that this would probably be the end for him in the famous Albiceleste, was in tears during the national anthem. Oh yeah, going back to Colombia for a second, I had a fan message me on Instagram basically begging for me to mention Dairo Moreno, who was called up to the national team for the first time in 9 years. So, you're welcome. And so that leaves us with the spot of the unknown, the position that'll keep one country's people dreaming. The playoff spot. Before the window, 3 teams were still in contention. Peru were just hanging by a thread and would have to win both of their games and see a miracle to keep their hopes alive. Which they didn't.
Oh, no, you don't!
So that leaves us with Bolivia and current holders Venezuela. With both of them losing their first games of the window respectively, this was the scenario going into their last qualifiers of the campaign. For Venezuela, it's their rivals Colombia. A win at home would seal the deal, but if they were to draw or lose, they would need to see the same result from Bolivia. While for Bolivia, it's a date with Ancelotti's Brazil. But remember, this takes place in an area with pretty much no oxygen. Either way though, to snatch that playoff spot on the final day, Bolivia has to win. It is the ultimate mid-off. The current holders, who are the only South American nation to have never qualified, versus the bandits who haven't seen the world stage since 1994. Just 2 minutes in, Venezuela take the lead in the Arepas derby and the whole stadium erupts into madness. 8 minutes later though, La Vinotinto concedes from the corner. Nevertheless, the indomitable spirit of Mano Tengo Fe struck back not even a minute later, and Venezuela restored their advantage over Bolivia. But if you thought Colombia being already confirmed meant they'd not go 100% in this game, you'd be mistaken, because these guys fucking hate Venezuela. And things were about to get even worse for La Vinotinto, as right before halftime, Bolivia win themselves a penalty, and it's converted by none other than their top scorer, peak wonder himself, Miguel Terceros. So as things stand, the Altitude Alphas overtake Venezuela. The absolute scenes. But not all is lost for the Venezuelans. There was still plenty of time left, and keep in mind, they haven't lost a single qualifier at home all campaign.
Por la izquierda, Luis Suárez que está habilitado. Luis Suárez para rematar.
Gol de Colombia.
Oh no.
Pelota por el medio para Luis Suárez. El perfil del gol de Colombia. Luis Suárez por un hat-trick.
Oh God.
Río que está habilitado dentro del área. Richard Río remató. Gol de Colombia. 5-2.
Colombia, stop this. They're already dead. You've already qualified. What does this senseless speeding even achieve?
She fucking hates herself. She's broken. She doesn't give a fuck. Broken. She knows. She's fucking tired. She's fucking. She hates herself. She's tired. She's not just tired. She's fucking.
With their triumph over Brazil, Bolivia keep their World Cup dreams alive. The mountain remains immortal. Over to North America, and we have reached the final round. How this one works is pretty simple. The remaining 12 teams will be split into 3 groups of 4. First place in each group will automatically qualify for the World Cup, while the 2 best runner-up nations will get a second chance in the Intercontinental Playoffs. In Group A, we got Panama, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Suriname. Speaking of Netherlands too, as the second lowest seeded team, they impressed a ton versus top seeded Panama and nearly escaped with the victory at the death. In the end though, both teams would kick off the third round sharing the points. Meanwhile in Guatemala, fans were pretty hopeful for their national team after seeing them go all the way to the semis in the recent Gold Cup. However, their opponents El Salvador had other ideas and surprised many with a late goal to collect all 3 points. They then returned home to face another team that experienced a morale booster themselves, Suriname, and it would be the Dutch B team who would draw first blood in the 12th minute. But El Salvador would not back down and equalized in the 72nd minute with a little help from a guy named Anfunny Dick Steele. This did not faze the Surinamese against the allegedly racist crowd though, as Duraso Class scores in the 80th minute to win it for Suriname. Now returning home, Panama needed to get things on the right track after a disappointing start to the campaign. But things got even worse after Guatemala with their first shot on target score in the 35th minute. Panama wasted no time though and acquired an equalizer just 2 minutes later. Nothing could separate the two after, so it all ended at 1-1. Looking at the table early on, it is Suriname surprisingly on top with 4 points. And because of Panama's underwhelming draws, this sees El Salvador in the runners-up spot thanks to their opening victory. Over to Group B, we have Jamaica, Curacao, Trinidad and Tobago, and Bermuda. Jamaica for once didn't underwhelm to begin qualifiers and absolutely destroyed any triangle phenomena in Bermuda. Meanwhile, in the Port of Spain, Trinidad and Curacao would begin the third round against each other. It was all Curacao in the first half, but momentum shifted heavily towards Trinidad in the second half. But thanks to some goalkeeper heroics for both nations, the points would be shared in the end. Curacao then went on to play Bermuda at home in an unexpected thriller. The home team built up a commanding 2-goal lead by the 30th minute thanks to former Man United academy player Tahith Chong. However, Bermuda catch the Curacao defense sleeping not once but twice and leveled the score right before the half. But it would be Tahith Chong coming up big once again as he assists the winner for his nation. Then to end off Group B for the month, the EFL Championship, if it was a country, make easy work of Trinidad to become the only nation to go perfect 6 of 6, which of course grants them the top spot while Curacao trails 2 points behind them in the playoff spot. Finally in Group C, Costa Rica, Honduras, Haiti, and Nicaragua. We kicked off with Haiti vs Honduras, which ended in a goalless draw with Haiti dominating but shooting more blanks than me on Hinge. Over in Nicaragua, Keylor Navas had returned from retirement because it pained him so much that his team was so ass. But come on Costa Rica, it's Nicaragua. They couldn't even beat Guadalupe to qualify for the World Cup. I'm sorry, Keylor. You don't deserve this. But don't give up just yet, Costa Ricans. In their next game, Los Ticos bagged 2 early goals versus Haiti. Let the craze cheering continue for head coach Miguel Herrera. Honduras make pretty easy work of Nicaragua with the 2-0 win, and because every other result in this group saw a draw, this actually sees the Hondurans top of the table with Costa Rica just edging Haiti for the runners-up spot due to goal difference. At last in European qualifiers, everyone has officially kicked off their campaigns, which only means this shit is about to get so much more confusing for everyone. In Group A, Antonio Rudiger was being put on skates by Slovakia all game, which costed Germany and surprised many as they lost 2-0 in their opening qualifier. Guess I need to change the title and thumbnail again. Nonetheless, Germany were able to bounce back with a 3-1 win versus Northern Ireland. But they still remain in early trouble after Slovakia managed a last-minute winner versus Luxembourg to finish September with 6 of 6 points. And because Northern Ireland has scored more goals than the Germans thanks in part to their victory versus Luxembourg, this actually sees Germany 3rd in the table. But again, it's way too early to call. Group B began with yet another Gyökeres vs Shesko derby, and just like the other one, it ended with both of them not scoring. Instead, it was Anthony Elanga with a sprinkle of brilliance that would draw first blood for the Swedes, which is cancelled out immediately into the second half by Old Man Olsen.
Dear basketball. From the moment I started rolling my dad's tube sock.
However, Sweden restored their lead in the 72nd minute, but once more, the lead is sabotaged, this time by the abysmal defending in the back. And that would continue into Sweden's next game as Kosovo stunned them with 2 counterattacks in the first half.
And shooting imaginary game-winning shots in the Great Western form.
Fy fan vad dåligt. Tack för idag. Vi ses en annan dag. Hej hej.
Now, it's probably a good time to mention that their head coach right now is John Dahl Tomasson, who is Danish. Meanwhile, favorites of the group, Switzerland, took the doubts personal. And maybe that was the wake-up call they needed as they destroyed Kosovo and then Slovenia to earn 6 points for the window. And as a result, they are now top of the group so far with an unexpected contender in Kosovo sitting in the playoff spot. Over in Group C, while Forest owner and Greek dictator Evangelos Marinakis argues with Boris Johnson for some reason, the Greek national team continues to look good as they roast the Belarusians in a brazen bull. However, there's still some work to be done in this project as they were then beaten pretty comfortably by Denmark at home. The Danes also picked up a draw away in Scotland earlier in the window, while the team of my other half managed a 2-0 win versus Belarus. So as it stands, Denmark and Scotland are tied on points with the Danes narrowly above due to goal difference, while Greece sit 3rd with a solid pocket of points to take forward. In Group D, Osama bin Diddy and France continue to wreak havoc in Europe. With some prime terrorism ball, the French collect 2 wins versus Ukraine and Iceland. Ukraine and Iceland's other opponent in this window were the other genocide merchants. Iceland destroyed them 5-0, while Ukraine, doing what they do best, have an underwhelming beginning to their qualification campaign. And the fans? were not happy. As it stands though, the French already confirm at least a playoff spot, while Iceland hold the actual spot itself. Group E started with a Euro 2024 rematch between Turkey and Georgia, where the Turks would once again prevail. For a while now, the Turks have shown this brand new chapter. No more disappointment, only excitement awaits. And then they lost 6-0 to Spain at home. Knowing how Turkish fans are, these guys probably had to get back to the hotel with like an armored vehicle. Meanwhile, Spain didn't lose any matches, but Lamine Yamal did lose his passport. But because Turkey allowed Mikel fucking Merino to drop a hat-trick on their heads, Georgia was able to hop into second through goal difference after a 3-0 win versus Bulgaria. Outside of them, Spain, to the shock of absolutely no one, lead the group. Group F delighted Turks everywhere living in Berlin, as they and the rest of the world got to see Portugal destroy Armenia 5-0. Portugal then made it 2-2 after beating their toughest opponents Hungary in a 5-goal thriller, while Hungary was taking over the reins for Turkey as the false dark horses were silent. Because the moment this team has a minuscule amount of pressure put upon them, they fold faster than Asian Eurovision. But don't worry, Hungarians, at least you didn't bottle as badly as the Ravens in week 1. But Irish people, don't think that these are signs of better times. You are still miserable. Anyways, Portugal lead the group so far, with Armenia currently in the playoff spots. I'm getting too excited, it's been 2 games. Last time we left off with Group G, Finland had a narrow lead, but the Netherlands still had 2 games in hand. You also had the Polish, but they were struggling due to conflicts within the dressing room. However, Poland have quickly dealt with this issue. Since being hired in July, manager Jan Urban has mended broken relationships with Lewandowski and Piotr Zielinski, and this has successfully translated onto the pitch as the Poles stole a point away from the Dutch and then got revenge against the Finnish. Fullback Matty Cash scored in both of these fixtures, so keep an eye on him because he's been thriving under this new system so far. The Netherlands did manage to collect a win to close off the window, but not without a little scare from Lithuania. Also, what the hell is the deal here, Lithuanians? You can put up a fight against the Netherlands and Finland, but you can't beat Malta in 2 games? What am I supposed to think of you? But as it stands, the Dutch take the lead in the table with the game in hand. And tied on points with them in the runners-up spot is Poland, who will be very happy with this window. Third place Finland are still in the hunt, but that loss to the Poles has taken a massive hit to their chances. In Group H, Bosnia was proving once more that Balkan blood ages like Shiska Kudo. But just behind them, tied on points, was both Austria with the game in hand and Romania. The Romanians, though, blew a 2-0 lead versus Cyprus in their only game, so we can just kind of ignore them for the rest of the campaign. Austria and Bosnia, on the other hand, were going band for band. Both won their first games of the month and then would face each other. 48 minutes played, a Bosnian defender does a bad job of clearing and Marcel Sabitzer capitalizes. 1 minute later though, 39-year-old Edin Dzeko once more comes to the rescue for the Bosnians. But then 15 minutes later, Konrad Leimer scores the winner for Austria. Funnily enough though, Bosnia remain top of the group due to goal difference, but Austria can easily overtake them if they win their next fixture in October. Group I had Norway dominating after they broke Italy, but they weren't done there. In the Norwegians' only game of this window, they made Moldova look as unstable as Transnistria, putting 11 past them.
Here's how I'll torture you, David. Number 1, the marrow furnace. I'll inject liquid metal into your bones, boiling them from the inside. Number 2, the nerve harvester. Each nerve fiber will be plucked and strung, vibrating with agony. Number 3, the organ grinder. The
same Moldovan side that beat Poland 3-2 a couple years ago saw Erling Haaland march into their box and bag 5 goals. He scored as many points as the New York Giants in week 1. Meanwhile, Italy under new manager Gennaro Gattuso won versus Estonia after a slow start to the game. However, only 16 minutes into their following match, they give up a silly own goal versus the Genocide Merchants.
Ciao a tutti. Votate per New Day will rise.
Fortunately, Moise Kean would come to the rescue and break through the only legal form of a blockade these guys have ever formed. But once more, the Italian defense shows as much of a spine as your average US politician. And boom, 20 trillion more to these guys' World Cup travel costs. However, Moise Kean gives the opposition a taste of their own medicine as he again occupies their space, and there's probably a good chance Moises' house will be hit by a drone in a couple weeks. But from there, Italy started finding more of a rhythm, with Politano giving them the advantage in the 59th minute, and then Raspadori adding a 4th in the 81st. It appears, though, that the Mossad recently hired more than one player, as this time Bastoni puts it in his own net in the 87th. And then 2 minutes later, the Italians once more shit the bed in defense. You know, it's already bad enough y'all aren't gonna qualify again, but now you're gonna let this happen. Tonali! And so, at the end of September, Norway looks stronger than ever at the top, and trailing behind them is Hamas. Group J, you had North Macedonia and Wales in the top 2, but Belgium still had 2 games in hand. Oh yeah, also, Kazakhstan is in this group as well, and just recently, FC Kairat just qualified for the Champions League, baby! Now, before any of you accuse me of being a bandwagon, I've had this for 2 years now. But Kazakhstan might want to borrow this to tie a noose with how this window went for them. They started by narrowly losing to Wales at home, and then they were bludgeoned by Belgium.
Better scramble like an egg before you get folded like an omelet.
And how about we continue to show some more love to these minnows, because they desperately need it. Liechtenstein conceded a total of 11 goals this window, 5 versus North Macedonia and 6 versus Belgium.
Better scramble like an egg before you get folded like an omelet.
I guess on a positive, at least the French parody account dedicated to this national team is still hilarious. Anyways, North Macedonia remain at the top, but Belgium are just a point away with the game in hand. Also, Wales is still in the fight, which makes me think that that matchup between them and North Macedonia on the last match day could be cinema. Group K was pretty straightforward, with England in the lead while a dogfight was happening for the runners-up spot. And England continued their perfect streak with a questionable win versus Moldova, and then just as everyone was dying the Tukelabon, they put 5 past the Serbians in Serbia. The Serbians did manage to pull out a victory in this window, as did their good friends Albania. So the table doesn't really change at all, but do keep in mind that Serbia still has that game in hand, and they play Albania next month. And finally, in Group L, the Croatians were using age-reversing magic again as they continue to be perfect all across the board. Meanwhile, runners-up Czechia are pulling away from the pack after they beat Montenegro. If you didn't get to watch any African qualifiers this month, I feel bad for you because this shit was peak. Group A was kinda straightforward though. Egypt were still unbeaten at the top in a realm beyond anyone else. Then you had Burkina Faso holding on to the playoff spot with Sierra Leone just hanging in there. Egypt continued their winning ways with the victory versus Ethiopia and then pretty much all but settled the group after denying Burkina Faso in their own home. Burkina Faso won't be too mad though, especially since they started the window penetrating Djibouti. But the points gap still remains between them and third place Sierra Leone, who just keep their hopes alive with the win versus Ethiopia. Burkina Faso and Sierra Leone will play in October, which will most definitely decide who advances to the playoffs. Group B though was way more exciting, as the unlikely candidates DR Congo narrowly edged out favorite Senegal for the automatic qualification spots. You also had an even more unlikely candidate in Sudan just a point away in third. Senegal though snapped them back into reality, and then the Sudanese hopes died by their own hands after ending the month with a loss to a Togo side who had not won a single game up to that point. Meanwhile, leaders DR Congo began their window strong with a 4-1 pummeling of South Sudan. This would then set up a heavyweight battle between them and Senegal. For Senegal, this was an opportunity to recover from their underwhelming start, but for DR Congo, this was life or death. Because over the last decade, fans in their own home stadium have had to witness their nation disappoint them in the most excruciating ways imaginable. 2018 qualifiers, DR Congo in just 2 minutes blew a 2-0 lead versus Tunisia, which would have seen them more than likely qualify. 2022 playoffs, after a miraculous start versus favorites Morocco, DR Congo conceded a late goal and then went on to be dismantled in the away leg. And once more, another crucial qualifier would be played in the Stade des Martyrs. But this time, the spirit amongst the fans felt different. The Congolese team looked better than ever, and were hungry to finally end this drought. 28 minutes played, Cedric Bakambu swiftly turns and wails it into the back of the net for DR Congo, and the whole stadium explodes into excitement. 7 minutes later, the Congolese once more troubled the abysmal Senegalese defense, and Yohan Wissa doubles the lead. This could finally be the moment for the Stade des Martyrs. However, Senegal would not go down without a fight, and with some luck off the post, Pape Gueye is in the right place at the right time to keep the Senegalese alive. Then, early in the second half, Nicholas Jackson with a flash of brilliance scores the equalizer, and just like that, the Congolese lead is gone. The crowd is now so silent you could hear a pin drop, but as it stands, DR Congo still remain at the top of Group B, and even better, the football had left Sadio Minor. But the moment Senegal decided to play with 11 men again, the guy who came in for Captain Creeper took just 2 minutes to assist the winning goal in the 87th minute. With that result, Senegal now return to the driver's seat, while the Spurs of Africa once more will have to settle for the playoffs. Going into September, Group C had its own surprises, with an emerging South African team dominating, with Rwanda and Benin 5 points behind. and Nigeria in 4th. Nigeria needed results in this window to avoid failing to qualify again, and even though they started with a very unconvincing performance versus Rwanda, the 3 points were all that mattered now. However, with the date in South Africa, this would be difficult, and Nigeria sure as hell didn't make it any easier for themselves. Fortunately, Nigerian defenders might not be able to do their actual jobs, but can throw their whole bodies at a ball. And thanks to some classic CAF organization, Nigeria saved themselves a point. But that still wasn't enough, because Benin got 2 for 2 in the window to remain 3 points above Nigeria with 2 games to go. It's not over just yet though. Nigeria and Benin will play their last qualifiers of the round against each other, but chances could be very slim entering that match depending on the other results. Group D. It just keeps coming, man. Cape Verde, who aren't even in this year's AFCON, were top of the group with favorites Cameroon a point below. You also had 3rd place Libya, who are now being managed by former Senegal coach Aliou Cisse. And Cisse's Libyan regime would begin with 2 solid victories versus Angola and the GeoGuessr meta country. Meanwhile, after winning their first games of the window, Cape Verde and Cameroon would battle it out for the automatic qualification spots. And it would be the Criollos who would end up on top thanks to a single goal from Daylon Livramento. And so Cape Verde, a nation with a population of just over 500k, are now just 1 win away from qualification for the first time ever. Cameroon will now have to settle for the playoff spot, but with that loss, it also opens the door for Cisse's Libya to potentially steal 2nd on the final day. Oh, and I guess also 4th place Angola are still in the fight too. Okay, maybe not. Over to Group E, things are a lot less chaotic as Morocco would continue to bully the opposition, and after a 5-0 win versus Niger, they have officially become the first African nation to qualify for the World Cup. While 3rd place Niger were able to bounce back with a clutch win versus 2nd place Tanzania to shrink the gap to just 1 point with 1 game left for both. Group F was all Ivory Coast and Gabon last time out, and would be the same throughout the September window as well. The top 2 won their first games and then played out a goalless draw with each other, so nothing changes besides the fact that literally everyone else is officially eliminated. Also, crazy ass stat, Ivory Coast still has yet to concede even once. Over to Group G, favorites Algeria sat first. Nothing too crazy there. The real entertainment though was the fight for the runners-up spot. Mozambique was shocking the whole African scene by holding the playoff position. 3 points behind them were other unexpected competitors in Botswana and Uganda. And just hanging in there, desperately needing a good window, was Guinea, who everyone initially believed were the favorites for the playoffs. And things were about to shake up even more. 3rd place Botswana lose both of their games, while 4th place Uganda destroy 2nd place Mozambique, and then finish off the window with 6 of 6 after an easy sweeping of Somalia. That now means Uganda move up to the playoff spot with just 2 games remaining, and this would not be possible had it not been for Alan Okello's 3 goals in his last 4 qualifiers. And with all this ruckus, it meant that if Algeria could beat Guinea in their last match of September, they'd officially return to the big dance. Followed by them though, you got the aforementioned Uganda sitting in the playoff spot. What a story that could be. But we can't be for certain just yet. Mozambique trailed them by goal difference, and while unlikely, Botswana and Guinea are still in the race. In Group H, Tunisia was absolutely dominant, having still not conceded a single goal yet. And after another 2 victories in September, they become the 2nd African nation to qualify for the World Cup in 2026. So this now left us with Namibia and Liberia battling it out for 2nd. The Namibians suffered their first loss of the campaign versus Malawi, but fortunately for them, Liberia lost 3-0 to Tunisia. Namibia won their 2nd game of the window, so now Liberia had to beat Malawi at home to keep their hopes alive. However, the Liberians built up a 2-0 lead by the 61st minute, and then they conceded 2 in a matter of 8 minutes. So now looking at the table, Namibia hold a 4-point advantage above the rest of the pack. And finally, Group I. Ghana, who aren't even in this year's AFCON, have been revitalized and now find themselves first in the group. Then you had some surprising appearances in the battle for the playoff spot between current holders Comoros, 3rd place Madagascar, who as of late had been making a late run to achieve the near impossible, and an underwhelming 4th place Mali side, who many at the beginning believed to be the favorites to finish runners-up. The window began with Mali versus Comoros, and the Malians would once again take care of business. However, in the Eagles' 2nd game, they lost 1-0 away in Ghana. This was able to open the door for the country named after a movie to hop into 2nd thanks to wins against the 2 worst teams in the group. And with Ghana being the only team with 4 or more points, they maintain a 3-point gap between 2nd, despite them giving Chad their first point of the whole campaign, while Comoros now fall to third after yet another disappointing window, and just hanging in there is Mali, who once more make DR Congo look like a clutch team.
Ici, moi je suis malien, je veux que mon fils joue pour le Mali. Écoutez ce qu'il me dit. Tu dis quoi?
Je veux jouer en Angleterre. On s'appelle pas Mali.
Tu joues pas pour Mali?
Non.
Pourquoi?
Je joue en Angleterre.
Mais faut jouer pour Mali.
Non.
Comme ça tu vas être capitaine numéro 10.
Non.
Tout ça c'est sa maman.
No.
October is going to be a wild closer to this exciting group though. Madagascar still have to play both 3rd and 4th place currently, and the Comoros have still yet to visit Ghana. So funnily enough, this is Mali's chance to somehow steal it on the final day, because outside Madagascar, they have Chad, who have only gotten 1 point so far. Now with just 2 games remaining for everyone besides, I guess, the one with Morocco since Eritrea was banned from this competition, let's take a look at the rankings of the runners-up countries so far. And this is really important because after the end of the October window, there will only be 4 teams moving on to the playoff round actually. Gabon have the most points with 19, Madagascar and DR Congo sit with 16 points, and just above the cut line is currently Burkina Faso on 15 points, who edge out a 4-way tie due to goal difference, with the most notable country at risk of not qualifying being Cameroon. Again, if you aren't watching any African qualifiers, I feel bad for you because this shit is peak. This is the final window for this round of African qualifiers, so we will be seeing a lot more nations qualifying and some drama regarding the playoffs. Because last time we left off, this was what the runners-up table for the playoffs was looking like, with the top 4 advancing being Gabon, Madagascar, DR Congo, and Burkina Faso. However, this table is no longer accurate because CAF has now determined that matches against the 6th place team would not count. This now means the top 4 is Gabon, Cameroon, DR Congo, and Benin. Burkina Faso and Madagascar supporters, you can thank the Eritrean government for this one. Group A was pretty much Egypt for the taking, and they officially returned to the World Cup after a 4-year absence with a 3-0 win in their first game of the window. Now it all came down to the fight for the playoff spot, currently held by Burkina Faso. Sierra Leone and Guinea-Bissau hypothetically still had a chance, but it probably wouldn't be enough to actually secure a spot. So all the pressure was on Burkina Faso to win out their remaining games, and they did so, beating Ethiopia and the country whose flag has the same design as the Family Mart logo. I spent about an hour editing all of Group B last month. Thank God that won't be the case this time around. With the Spurs of Africa fumbling a 2-0 lead at home, again, Senegal now returned to the top, and they would not give it back as they won out their last 2 games to qualify automatically. However, DR Congo was at least able to lock in a playoff spot after they too won out both of their remaining fixtures. Group C was absolute chaos, and it was only about to get so much crazier. At the end of last month's window though, South Africa were at the top, but only 3 to 4 points were between them and 4th place. And there were still some massive games in October that would decide a lot of things. Benin vs Rwanda, Benin vs Nigeria, and Rwanda vs South Africa. But before anything could actually even start, Benin pointed out a recent controversy surrounding South Africa and an ineligible footballer that played for Lesotho. They demanded CAF dock points from South Africa, and that request was fulfilled not too long after. So going into October, Group C looked a bit different with South Africa and Benin now tied on points. This point deduction also gave Nigeria and even Rwanda a chance to qualify automatically. Whether it was automatic or playoffs though, for Nigeria to keep their hopes alive, they more than likely had to win both of their games. And they did well with their first match versus Lesotho, but did try to find a way to fuck it up in the very end. Meanwhile in Rwanda, Benin got the weirdest late winner you might ever see. It was so odd that the cameras barely even caught what happened, but either way, Benin grabbed a crucial victory for their fight. Meanwhile, for Bafana, Zimbabwe had nothing to play for, but because they hated South Africa so much, they did everything in their power to hold them to a draw. And with that result, this now saw Benin top of the group going into the final match day. But remember when I mentioned that it was Benin who forced CAF's hand regarding South Africa? Well, don't you think it was a little suspicious to bring that up late into the campaign when they were only 3 points from automatic qualification? Yeah, South Africa didn't appreciate that at all. Not to mention, Benin's neighbors/rivals Nigeria were also their last opponents. So now all of a sudden, this small nation that no one even thought about months prior were now having their downfall being preyed upon by at least 500,000 South Africans and Nigerians. Because if Nigeria could beat Benin, that would mean South Africa could qualify automatically if they beat Rwanda. South Africa did the first bit of business with a more than convincing victory versus Rwanda. So now it was up to Nigeria to do the dirty work to send South Africa to the big dance, but they also needed to absolutely incinerate Benin in order to steal the playoff spot themselves. themselves. And luckily for the Nigerians, Victor Osimhen was certainly up for that task as he scored a hat-trick in less than an hour and single-handedly saved Nigeria from embarrassment. Someone built this guy a statue in Lagos already. Over in Group D, we were so close to witnessing history as Cape Verde was just one win away from qualifying for the World Cup for the first time in their history. They had their party initially spoiled by Libya, but they couldn't possibly fuck it up versus Eswatini. And after a 3-0 win versus the GeoGuessr Merchants, Cape Verde officially becomes the second smallest nation to ever qualify for the World Cup. Cameroonians will not be happy about their chain being snatched by a country made of 10 islands, but with 4 points earned this month, it's enough to seal a spot in the playoff round. With Morocco already qualified, it all came down to Tanzania seeking a spot in the playoffs. That was quite literally impossible though, because they only had 1 game remaining, which wouldn't be enough to catch up to anyone. And even then, we're getting too ahead of ourselves here, because they'd need to win that game. Which they didn't. No one else was able to advance, but credit to Niger, who won out their last 2 fixtures, with Daniel Sosa catching fire with 3 goals in his last 3 qualifiers. Group F had everyone eliminated from qualifying besides Ivory Coast and Gabon, who were both already confirmed at least the playoffs. Ivory Coast, who still have yet to concede a single goal, tore apart the Seychelles 7-0. By the way, I got bored one time, and as a normal person does when they get bored, they look at the Seychelles national team's results history. Yeah, did you guys know that they haven't beaten an African team in 9 years? Now you do. Anyways, Ivory Coast officially confirmed their return to the tournament for the first time since 2014 after beating Kenya. Gabon, on the other hand, had 36-year-old Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang carry them with 4 goals to secure a win. Another African side that hasn't seen the tournament since 2014 was Algeria, but they finally returned as well after comfortably beating Somalia. And unfortunately, no matter what anyone else in this group could do, it wouldn't be enough for a playoff spot. Uganda, you did everything you could in this final stretch. Unlucky. Tunisia had already claimed Group H while everyone else was eliminated because they mathematically couldn't be one of the top 4 runners-up. I mean shit, after the rules changed about how points were counted for this, Namibia was ranked last. Lastly, we have Group I, where Ghana were so close to qualifying for a 2nd straight tournament. They inched even closer after a pummeling of Central African Republic, and then finally booked their ticket thanks to a single goal from Mohamed Kudus. Second place Madagascar entered this month with the chance to shock many and steal a playoff spot on the final day. They started October beating Comoros in a torrential downpour. Mali, however, saw this, said we hate fun, and proceeded to ruin Madagascar's hopes and dreams. Now that this round is over, let's quickly go over the 4 teams that have miraculously found another way to potentially qualify. Those teams are Gabon, DR Congo, Cameroon, and somehow Nigeria. There's no draws for this, by the way, because the matchups have already been decided. First seeded Gabon will play 4th seeded Nigeria, and second seeded DR Congo will play 3rd seeded Cameroon. All I'm gonna say is, just like I did in the previous qualifier review, it could be absolute cinema come November. We are now into the second window of 3 for European qualifiers, and tension and stakes are only going to get higher. Group A started with an early scare for the Germans after an opening loss for Slovakia, but like a Roki Sasaki playoff closer, they weren't fazed by the pressure and collected their second win of the campaign versus Luxembourg. Meanwhile, the Slovakians shit the bed versus a team that hasn't been relevant since Will Grigg in 2016.
I'm out of sync, I guess, because I didn't know you till today.
The Germans, on the other hand, were able to break down the Northern Irish thanks to a single goal from the most Australian-looking man you'll ever see. So much for that excitement. Thanks for nothing, guys. So at the end of the month, the Germans eased the stress after jumping from 3rd to 1st in the group. Slovakia was at least able to collect a win versus Luxembourg, so they sit tied on points. That result also means Luxembourg are already eliminated, which, like, damn, what the fuck, guys? I expected y'all to at least fight back. Don't count out 3rd place Northern Ireland, though. They play Slovakia next month, and if they can beat them again, all the pressure would be on Slovakia since they end the group with Germany, while Northern Ireland plays 0-point Luxembourg at home. Over to Group B, most people expected a dogfight between the Swedes and femboys, but they both started miserably. Nevertheless, new month, new slate. Now was time to rewrite all early failures. They say that despite Sweden being one of the happiest countries, their suicide rate is also one of the highest. And that's probably because of this defense. Sweden has 2 top 10 strikers in the world right now, and not even that can get them a result versus a nation in its 3rd ever World Cup qualification campaign ever. This is probably a good time to mention that not only is agent John Dahl Thomason Danish, he's also Denmark's all-time top scorer, and in Euro 2004, he did this versus Sweden. What the hell was the Federation thinking? Oh yeah, by the way, that suicide rate myth? Entirely made up by the American government. Meanwhile, Kosovo in the match prior put up a defensive masterclass for Slovenia to grab another point.
I have to you for keeping the shit very clean.
Thank you.
Only thank you.
No, thank you for for the support.
This is no longer a fluke. Kosovo now sit in the playoff spot with a 4-point gap between them and third place Slovenia, while Switzerland sit pretty 3 points above them, assured at least the playoffs. Group C was pretty close to start off, with Denmark and Scotland tied for the top, while one other nation was not too far off. And we knew since the Euro playoffs, Greece was on the up, and they made an even bigger statement, silencing the Scottish crowd with an hour played. But just when we were all starting to believe in the Greek dream, they concede the equalizer just 2 minutes later, give up another goal, and then in the dying minutes, their keeper proceeded to do this shit. The Greeks then traveled to Copenhagen and saw their World Cup dreams burst into flames after just 41 minutes played. Going back to the top two, they both played Belarus as well. Denmark put 6 past them, while Scotland was doing all they could to produce one of the most unconvincing wins a human being has ever seen. Anyways, now with everyone else eliminated, Denmark and Scotland remain in the top two, and these guys will play each other in their last qualifiers next month to determine who qualifies automatically and who will have to go through hell to do it. Group D had France in first, with Iceland surprising many sitting above Ukraine, but again, it was way too early to say anything. The two nations, though, would face each other to start the window. After a horrendous start to the campaign, like usual, Ukraine started getting the ball rolling as they drew first blood. But Iceland weren't gonna let them by this easily and equalized 20 minutes later. However, then Ukraine finally decided to actually lock in and scored one right before and one right after halftime. Welcome to the playoffs, I guess. Not if Albert Gudmundsson has anything to say about that though, as he leads a quick comeback with just 15 minutes to go. But this does nothing in the grand scheme of things, as Ukraine thrive on the pressure and respond with 2 late goals to seal the deal. The Ukrainians then finished 6 of 6 for the window after getting their revenge versus the other genocide merchants. But it wasn't over for Iceland just yet, and they can thank France's Jules Koundé attempting a one-man offside trap for that one. France wasn't only playing diddy ball though. Against the other genocide merchants, Mbappe scored a ridiculous solo goal. And then for the third goal, we saw this from Florian Thauvin of all people. This sees the French remain in first, with Ukraine 3 points behind them in the playoff spots. Although third place Iceland can't be counted out yet, especially since Ukraine and Iceland play each other in their last qualifiers next month. Over to Group E, and even though only 2 games have been played so far, Spain are already pretty much confirmed automatic qualification. Not mathematically, they just are. Even without Lamine Yamal due to his dick being broken or something, Spain collected 6 of 6 points with ease. Meanwhile, after their embarrassing 6-0 loss at home, Turkey was determined to make a statement this month. And they definitely did that, as they feasted upon Bulgaria and then ripped Georgia to shreds. So after the October window, Spain are miles away, with Turkey sitting comfortably in a playoff spot. Georgia still has a chance, but with only 2 games remaining for everyone, they'd need to win out both of their games and see Turkey lose their remaining fixtures. Issue though, Germany still has to play Spain, and there's more of a chance that Gianni Infantino stops giving Donald Trump head than Bulgaria beating Turkey. Entering October, Group F saw Portugal 3 points clear at the top, with Armenia having a surprise appearance in the playoff spots. That did not last long, however, as Hungary, now hungry for points, beat the Armenians 2-0. Meanwhile in Lisbon, it would go all the way to the death until Portugal broke through Ireland's defense. And who else but Ruben Neves wearing his late friend Diogo Jota's number to be the one to do it. The struggles continued for Portugal at home though, as Hungary silenced the whole stadium just 8 minutes in. However, here comes Cristiano Ronaldo to the rescue, and the 40-year-old gives the Portuguese the lead right before halftime. This also means Cristiano Ronaldo is now the all-time leading World Cup qualifiers goal scorer. But we mustn't forget that whenever there are exactly 0 expectations for Hungary to perform, they actually do something. And Portugal probably didn't get that memo, as Dominic Szoboszlai saves his nation a point at the death. Meanwhile, Ireland were able to just keep their hopes alive after getting some revenge versus Armenia, with Evan Ferguson scoring his 3rd goal in his last 4 caps. So at the end of October, Portugal, despite some struggles, hold a 5-point lead at the top, while Hungary, Ireland, and Armenia will be going at it in a dogfight next month. Armenia versus Hungary kicks off November, while a potential runners-up decider between Hungary and Ireland happens later on. Group G had the Dutch on top with a game in hand, with Poland hopping into second thanks to their bounce back window last month, which included a crucial revenge victory versus Finland. For Finland, their qualification hopes took a massive hit last month, so it was extremely important for them to win the 2 fixtures they had in October. And they started well, coming back from 1-0 down to beat Lithuania. But unfortunately, their second game was away in the Netherlands, and they were straight up demoralized by the 40th minute. The Dutch also collected another victory earlier in the window versus Malta. Meanwhile, Poland had only 1 game this window, but they made it count with a solid victory versus Lithuania. So as it stands, the Dutch remain in maintain the lead with Poland 3 points behind them in the playoff spots. The two will play each other next month in Warsaw, but even if Poland win, the Netherlands' goal difference will probably break that tie. Since the beginning of Group H, it's been a waiting game for the inevitable. However, Bosnia has done an exceptional job at holding strong at the top, but Austria did just beat them last month and still have that damn game in hand, which they would finally play in this window and drop 10 on San Marino in the process. But Bosnia can still easily lock in the playoff spot as they score 2 early goals versus Cyprus, but then they ball the lead. It's fine though, Romania's basically out and they still have to play Austria. But you could kinda tell this was a different Romania when someone tried this shit in the first 15 minutes. And the Romanians didn't stop there. Faster than their hands to a wallet were their constant barrage of attacks. They then finally found the breakthrough in the 5th minute of stoppage time as they not only stunned the Austrians, but revived their campaign. With 2 more games remaining, this was great news for the Romanians. And also San Marino. Because of UEFA's constant need to implement the Nations League into everything, 4 of the best ranked Nations League group winners who don't finish top 2 will advance to the playoffs alongside the 12 runners-up finishers. Right now in order, that's Wales, Romania, Sweden, Northern Ireland, who would advance, while Moldova and San Marino miss out. So that means if 2 of those teams in the current top 4 finish runners-up next month, San Marino is in the playoffs. Realistically speaking, they would need Northern Ireland and Romania to lock in, and it just so happens that Romania is in their group. Not only that, Romania and San Marino play each other in their last respective qualifier. So if Romania can pull off a win versus Bosnia to start November, it would literally be in the best of San Marino's interest to concede as many goals as physically possible to give Romania a better goal difference off a possible tiebreaker. That's right, San Marino could actually advance to the playoffs with 0 points and a negative 100 goal difference. This is the shit the Nations League created. No one was looking more forward to destroying the genocide merchants than Erling Haaland.
ממי, למתי הזמנת את הבייביסיטר? אנחנו מאחרים.
From minute 1, Haaland was looking like Demon LeBron from the 2012 Eastern Conference Finals. He was out here treating opposing defenders as if it was the Israeli government seeing a toddler under the age of 1. This hate watch was so satisfying that I cannot even tell you how many times I've replayed Haaland pushing someone into an own goal and running off to celebrate as the defender writhes in pain. Put that shit in a niche film festival now! By halftime, it was already 3-0 and Haaland would add 2 more to cap off the first ever hat-trick to unite the world. Alright, Italy. I need you to lock in now. The Italians started their window winning 3-1 with Moise Kean once again bagging another goal. Unfortunately, he grabbed an injury shortly after scoring. Hopefully that doesn't fuck up their chances of qualifying like the last time they lost a key forward. Thankfully for the time being, the Italians still had Matteo Retegui. So Gianni, no need to worry about solving those complex geopolitical issues like banning Israel, because Matteo can do all that for you instead, as he scores a brace to officially put an end to the genocide merchants' hopes and dreams. Now looking at the table, it's just Norway and Italy left. These two play next month in Milan, but seeing how the goal difference is so far in Norway's favor, Italy may as well mentally prepare themselves for playoff hell for a 3rd straight time. Also, let's give those genocide merchants one last send-off. This clip is from last year's Euro playoffs, but considering it pissed off so many people before, I want to show it again.
Ajaba!
Group J had North Macedonia hanging on to the top spot while Belgium was on their tail with the game in hand. And North Macedonia did exactly what they needed to do to stay there, holding Belgium to a 0-0 draw at home. But then they fucked it all up being held to a draw versus 4th place Kazakhstan. We can't have anything nice, man. Belgium, on the other hand, beat Wales 4-2, which finally saw them overtake North Macedonia for the automatic qualification spots. However, the North Macedonia still hold a 3-point lead for the playoff spot, but they only have 1 game in November versus Wales. I would build more hype for this matchup, but it literally doesn't matter. Both of these teams will advance because they won their Nations League groups. Similar to Group I, there was only one thing people were looking forward to in Group K: Serbia versus Albania. Again. The initial matchup had an interesting build-up, but the actual match itself was pretty boring. But just like the first game in Albania, we once again saw some petty flag drama. This time though, Serbia just flat out refused to put any kind of Albanian flag in their stadium. Not only that, Serbian authorities even announced that no Albanian symbols would be allowed in the stadium. At all. Albania's national team didn't care too much though, because after scoring the only goal of the game, Raymond and I ran straight towards the Serbian bench with a double eagle gesture, to which Serbians in the stands responded by singing the Balkans' most peaceful song, Kill the Albanians. Our sport has never been more back. Nationalistically, this is a monumental win for Albanians, and an even bigger one for their qualification hopes, because this now meant Albania was closer to locking in the playoffs, while Serbia was almost certainly down and out. Because while it's only a 1-point gap after Serbia was able to recover versus Andorra, Albania's next games are Andorra away and England at home. And for Serbia, they have Latvia at home, but also England away. Group L saw Croatia and Czechia tied on points, with the Croatians on top due to goal difference. The two played each other earlier in the campaign, where the Croatian unction destroyed Czechia. They went at it again this month in Prague, and Czechia was able to get a positive result to maintain their claim of the playoff spot. But of course, it couldn't be that easy, as in their second game, the Faroe Islands took the lead in the 67th minute. The Czechs struck back with an equalizer, but then just 2 minutes later, the Faroe Islands catch the keeper in no man's land, and a guy who had just come on 10 seconds prior scores the winner. And prior to this game, the Faroe Islands annihilated Montenegro 4-0 to complete a perfect window.
I will shred this universe down to its last atom.
Which now sees these Nordic minnows just a single point off a playoff spot. Unfortunately, their last game is in Croatia, while Czechia has a slam dunk match against Gibraltar at home. Oh, by the way, Montenegro has been so bad as of late that they gave Liechtenstein its first goal of the year, and it took until the 74th minute to find an equalizer. CONCACAF teams continued their conquest of seeking a spot in the US. Whether their visas will be accepted is another story. Going into October, the Dutch C team Suriname had a 1-point lead in Group A. El Salvador was able to clutch up versus Guatemala last month, so that saw them in the playoff spot. Third place Panama had a very underwhelming start to the campaign, so they really need to pick up the pace this month. But it only kept getting worse, with the Panamanians conceding right before halftime in El Salvador. Fortunately though, the goal was called back due to a foul in the build-up. Into the second half though, here comes El Salvador again, and somehow that didn't end up in the net. And they'd regret missing that, as Panama immediately went the other way and found the breakthrough, but it's offside. Wait, it isn't? Nonetheless, El Salvador continue to push, and finally a little fortune goes their way as they're awarded a penalty. Wait, what? Did the VAR van get hijacked or some shit? That is so obviously a handball. In the end, Panama's 12th man came through for them, and they collect their first win of the campaign. Suriname started the window dominating Guatemala throughout the majority of the game, but a single defensive error costed them with just 15 minutes to go. However, in the stoppage time, Virgil Misijan with the utmost precision threads the needle to save the Dutch C team a point. Following that game was a matchup between Suriname and Panama, but the night before the game, Panamanian supporters were out in droves trying to disrupt the Suriname national team sleep. Only problem, the national team was joining in on those vibes. Just 21 minutes into the match in Panama, Suriname made a statement that would be heard all around the region. Nonetheless, right at the death, Panama would spoil the party and save themselves a point. Meanwhile, in El Salvador, Guatemala was able to get some revenge with a single goal at the beginning of the second half. Because of Suriname's own fuck-ups and Panama stealing candy from a baby, the Surinamese lead at the top has entirely diminished, while Guatemala's 4 points keeps them in the hunt just a point away now. And El Salvador, who started this window second, had quite the reality check with 2 straight losses, sending them to last. Group B had favorites Jamaica on top after winning their first 2 games. Below them in the playoff spot was Curacao with their best ever chance to qualify, and they'll like those chances even more after upsetting Jamaica to start October. It really is the history of the Jamaica. Curacao Mania then continued into their following match, as it took just 19 minutes to score versus Trinidad. But then later in the second half, Trinidad's Tyrese Spicer would extinguish some of that fire, and the game would end 1 apiece. Meanwhile in Kingston, Jamaica bounced back versus Bermuda, and they can thank the Bermudan agent they hired right before the game. So despite Curaçao's triumph, they weren't able to capitalize, which means Jamaica is still top of the table. But the gap is now down to 1 point. On to Group C, and this was another interesting one where no one really knew who would prevail. So far though, Honduras was the only team to win a game last time out, so they sit first, while Costa Rica and Haiti are tied for the playoff spot, with Costa Rica breaking the tie because they've scored more goals. And so we begin.
Oh, and the lights have gone out.
And so we begin with Haiti versus Nicaragua, and for the Haitians, the lighting and torrential downpour were more of a threat than Nicaragua, as they easily take a W back home. Later that same night, Honduras and Costa Rica played, and I think both teams should be eliminated considering this was one of the worst matches I have ever seen. Both of those teams decided to start scoring goals in their second games though. Costa Rica looked the most convincing they have all campaign with a 4-1 win versus last place Nicaragua, but it would be Honduras to really shake things up as they make easy work of Haiti at home. That now sees both nations positions in the top 2 with Honduras holding the qualification spot. But sitting just a point from second though, it's not over at all for Haiti yet. Same can't really be said about Nicaragua though. Now officially down to 6 teams in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, Indonesia, and Iraq. 2 teams at the end of this window would qualify for North America. But even before a ball was kicked, FIFA announced that every game would be played in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, basically gifting them both home field advantage. But why not just do it like normal qualifiers? I mean, just have every nation host their own home games. Fuck them. That's why. Anyways, here's how this round works. There will be 2 groups with 3 teams each. Teams will play each other just once, and whoever finishes first in the group will qualify automatically. Qatar and Oman started Group A, and the hosts dominated, but in the end, they couldn't find the back of the net. 3 days later, Oman picked up an early advantage versus the UAE thanks to a good bit of fortune. But having missed the tournament through about 8 different playoffs over the years, the UAE was growing tired of the same shit. And after a barrage of attacks, they finally scored the equalizer and then accidentally found the winner. Accident or not though, it still counted, and that would eliminate Oman. And so it all came down to Qatar versus UAE in the neutral venue of Jassim bin Hamad Stadium located in Qatar. UAE, seeking to end an almost 40-year-long episode of suffering, took a few bites to start out, but it would be Qatar to find the breakthrough early into the second half. They added another goal later on to put the game to bed, as all UAE could do was grab a late consolation. And so once again, another legitimate achievement for the Qataris, while Emirati fans in the stands finally reached their breaking point and started rioting. Never let anyone tell you qualifiers are boring. On to Group B, which started with Indonesia versus Saudi Arabia. And it would be the Indonesians who struck first through a penalty in the 8th minute. However, the Saudis quickly realized that it was way too easy to break down a Patrick Kluivert-led squad, and they equalized just 6 minutes later. Then, with a little over half an hour played, Saudi Arabia draw themselves a penalty and take the lead. Now seeing his team losing, Patrick Kluivert didn't even think to change anything, and again Saudi Arabia would punish Indonesia in the 62nd minute. Indonesia did manage one more goal late on, but it wouldn't be enough as Project Airfanad 2.0 is off to a flying start in the round. Iraq then entered the picture 3 days later to play the Dutch East Indies. While the Iraqis weren't performing very well, they were luckily up against Patrick Kontol, who's quite experienced in killing things. And in the 76th minute, former United Academy player Zidane Iqbal would score the winner. Thank you, Iraq, and fuck you, George Bush. Now you may be wondering, Maxwell, this is kind of tame. You're not really clowning on Indonesia that much. Oh, don't worry, I made a whole video about it. Anyways, now it all came down to Saudi Arabia versus Iraq in the neutral venue of King Abdullah Sports City Stadium, located in Saudi Arabia. And it ended in a 0-0 draw. Congrats to the Saudis for qualifying for a 3rd straight World Cup. What a big surprise to us all. Don't worry though, Emiratis and Iraqis, your hopes are still alive in this never-ending gauntlet of second chance rounds. Next month, you will participate in a 2-legged playoff. The winner does not automatically qualify. Instead, they advance to the Intercontinental Playoffs. It never fucking ends. We start with CONCACAF because this was absolute peak. Going into the last match day, Group A saw Suriname having a slight advantage over Panama through goals scored, while Guatemala and El Salvador were on the outside looking in. Both would have to win their first game of the window to stay alive. El Salvador did not understand that assignment whatsoever though, as they were pummeled 4-0 by Suriname. Guatemala, on the other hand, did incredibly to fight back from a 2-0 deficit versus Panama, but in the end, they were just no match for arguably the best team outside the top 3 CONCACAF nations. Group B was cooking something special thanks to Curaçao's stunning upset versus Jamaica last window. The Reggae Boys still had the advantage in the group, but in classic Jamaica fashion, they fumbled that group lead after conceding a late equalizer to Trinidad. Curaçao, on the other hand, destroyed Bermuda, meaning they would take the qualification spot going into the final day. Group C saw Honduras top of the group after holding Costa Rica to a draw, and then dethroning Haiti after beating them 2-0. With 1 win and 3 draws was Costa Rica just behind them, while Haiti sat a point below those two. Meanwhile, 1 point Nicaragua was hypothetically still in the fight for a playoff spot, but that's just not gonna. Holy shit, they beat Honduras. And it gets even wilder because Haiti produced a resilient upset versus Costa Rica, which sees them just 1 point from an automatic qualification spot. Now into the final day, and no qualification or runners-up spot locked in, here is quite literally everything that could happen. In Group A, Suriname simply just need to beat Guatemala to qualify. For Panama to qualify though, they need to beat El Salvador and see Suriname draw or lose. Or if Suriname win, Panama has to find a way to better their goal difference. In Group B, Curaçao versus Jamaica sets up an incredible finale. Because of Jamaica's choke job, Curaçao just need a win or draw to make the dream come true, while Jamaica have to win, so they'll be thanking their lucky stars that this one's at home. In Group C, 3 teams are still alive. Honduras qualify if they beat Costa Rica. That's the easiest way for them. Haiti can qualify if they can beat Nicaragua, but they need to see a draw between Honduras and Costa Rica. In order for Costa Rica to qualify, they need to beat Honduras, and then the rest of their fate is in the hands of Nicaragua. So yeah, this shit ain't happening. But let's not forget that runners-up position from each group, because of the 3 teams currently sitting second, only the best 2 will advance to the Intercontinental Playoffs. Right now, that would be Jamaica and Panama, while Haiti just miss out. But anything can change with a single goal. And so, on the night of November 18th with Zealand and Beaufort Lancer, I watched what I can only describe as absolute cinema. By the way, if you're a real OG and have been watching since the career mode days, you probably remember that time I beefed with Beaufort Lancer, which makes this even funnier. Anyways, the final day kicked off as you'd expect it to, with the fight between Hondurans and Costa Ricans within the first 5 minutes. These 2 teams were about to get a whole lot less happier though, as Haiti quickly found the back of the net versus Nicaragua with just 9 minutes played. With that goal, Haiti have jumped into the qualification spot while Honduras fall to second. And things just keep getting worse for Honduras, because after Panama take an early lead versus El Salvador, that now means if results stand, Panama qualify, Suriname are in the Intercontinental Playoffs, and Honduras would be eliminated entirely as the worst runners-up team. 18 minutes now, Jamaica needing that win find themselves on the break but are denied by the post. 23 minutes played, Honduras seeking that goal to send them to the World Cup nearly score it. Fast forward to almost the end of the first half, Haiti double their lead. The Haitians are doing everything right tonight, but still have to hope Honduras doesn't score. But luckily for them, Keylor Navas is carrying the dreams of 2 nations on his back. Over in Panama, a penalty sees them take a 2-0 lead versus El Salvador, and that would be the end of the first half. Here's how things stand so far. Panama would qualify out of Group A, as there has still been nothing from Suriname's game versus Guatemala. In Group B, Curacao would book a ticket to the big dance, as they are currently putting up an incredible defensive shift versus Jamaica. In Group C, Haiti would qualify thanks to their commanding 2-0 lead, and Honduras failing to score versus one of the worst Costa Rican sides in recent time. And finally, in the runners-up table, it would be Jamaica and Suriname advancing to the Intercontinental Playoffs. Into the second half now, and Guatemala draw first blood versus Suriname. Fortunately for the Dutch C team though, they still remain as one of the top 2 best runners-ups. But if Honduras manage to score a goal, they'll be in danger of elimination. Things are about to shake up even more in the runners-up table though. Into the 53rd minute, a Jamaican long throw in is met by a towering header, but again the ball hits the post. 57 minutes played now, and Suriname concede again. This is not how they wanted the night to go, but they are still in the playoff spot. They do need to make sure they don't concede anymore, because they are only above Honduras because of goals scored now. But what do you know? Suriname are just straight up collapsing at this point. Just 8 minutes later, Guatemala dunks on them yet again. And with this demoralizing result, Suriname have gone from top of Group A all the way down to flat out elimination. All the while Honduras have done nothing. Almost 20 minutes remaining now. Jamaica still searching for that breakthrough, but it appears the football gods are playing a cruel joke on them at this point. Fast forward to the 85th minute now, and Panama sealed the deal with a 3rd goal and returned to the World Cup for the first time since 2018. Meanwhile in Kingston, desperation is in full force for Jamaica as they lob one up into the box. It's a great setup right in front of the goal, but it hits the post for a 3rd time. Into stoppage time in Guatemala now. Suriname has to score to keep their qualification hopes alive, and they do just that thanks to some help from an opposing defender. And as it stands now, Suriname are once more amongst the best 2 runners-up nations because of goals scored, meaning Honduras need to actually do something or else they're eliminated. What are they up to right now, by the way?
De todo, Marcelo Santos, y se arma la cámara húngara.
Big news in Kingston though. No, it is not another ball hitting the woodwork. It's Jamaica being awarded a penalty with 1 minute of stoppage time remaining. Ah, wait, never mind. The defender got the ball.
Oh my god.
And with that, Curacao has officially qualified for the World Cup for the first time in their history. They also become the smallest nation to ever qualify with a population of just a little over 150,000. To put that into perspective, India has 9,733 times the population and can't even find one player who can help them beat Bangladesh. But I'm not done there, because with the draw between Costa Rica and Honduras, that also means Haiti has officially qualified for the World Cup. It'll be their first time in the big dance since 1974, and the way they pulled it off is nothing but incredible. Because the national team achieved this feat without playing a single game in Haiti due to political unrest. And now the country can cherish this moment. A rare moment of unity that hopefully leads to more into next year. And finally, while they did lose out on an automatic qualification spot, Suriname's dream remained alive after snatching away Honduras' ambitions right at the death. They will have another shot to qualify to the World Cup through the Intercontinental Playoffs, which will take place in March. Jamaica also joins them, but spirits there are pretty much the polar opposite. After the match versus Curaçao, head coach Steve McLaren announced his resignation with an already pre-written letter. No wonder why Jamaica fumbled, man. Their own manager didn't believe in them. On to European qualifiers, where this round comes to an end finally. Group A at the beginning of the window saw the top two of Germany and Slovakia tied on points. Germany started the window with a 2-0 win versus Luxembourg thanks to the most Australian looking man again.
What are you talking about?
While Slovakia found a last-minute winner off a corner versus Northern Ireland. The Germans and Slovakians then played each other to determine who would qualify for 2026. And this shit wasn't even close. Need not worry though, Slovakia, as you still have a chance through the playoffs in March, as does Northern Ireland through the Nations League. Group B has been a big stunner for most people, as both teams most people believed were sure candidates for the playoffs have been god-awful. But this has opened the door for Kosovo to sit in second with a comfortable 4-point gap. The only team that was able to reach them now was Slovenia, but they were quickly put to bed with some absolutely elegant football.
Twisting, turning, and firing into the far corner! It is a dream start for Kosovo!
And then later in the match, a Slovenian defender decided to put his nation out of its misery.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Nothing. Me? Just hanging around.
Meanwhile, Switzerland bullied Sweden, again, and then played out a draw with Kosovo, which was more than enough points for the Swiss to qualify for the World Cup for the 6th straight time. On the other hand, Kosovo advances to the playoffs, as does Sweden, because of the Nations League. Someone please send a nuke at this competition. Group C had just Scotland and Denmark left alive. Both were tied on points going into November, which could potentially set up an incredible finale as the two would play each other later in the window. But first, to begin the month, Denmark had a game versus Belarus, and Scotland had an away day in Greece. And the Danes could only settle for a draw, which was a massive blow to their qualification hopes, is what I'd say if their opponent was literally anyone besides Scotland, who fell 3-0 down to Greece by the hour mark. Scotland responded though, pulling 2 back in just 5 minutes, but this was just the illusion of hope. Because then, Greek keeper Vlachodimos decided he hates the Scottish and turns into prime Neuer. So going into the top of the table clash finale now, all the Danes had to do to qualify was get a draw, while Scotland had to win at all costs. In translation, Denmark had officially booked a ticket because the Scots have never been able to perform under pressure.
The tricks and what?
But don't forget that this team is the arbiter of my suffering. Disappointment is not only inevitable, it's a lifestyle for them. But then, 77 minutes played, a Scotland corner delivery is flinged across the box, and Lawrence Shankland is on the end of it. What a way to get your first World Cup qualifier goal, as this goal might just take Scotland to the promised land. Not even 4 minutes later though, Scotland struggled to clear a delivery and concede. Fuck me, man. However, this is unlike any Scottish side I have ever seen. They just will not stop fighting. This is it, Scotland. End the decades of suffering. Rewrite history. Right here. Right fucking now.
Here's McLean. He's going to shoot.
Scotland, the other half of me, I will not be elaborating on that point, are returning to the World Cup for the first time since 1998. I cannot wait to get pissed drunk with a bunch of Scots next summer. Going into November with Group D, France was almost certain to qualify, and that quickly became confirmed after they destroyed Ukraine 4-0. This also allowed Iceland to overtake for second thanks to goal difference after they picked up a win to start the window. So we had another match that would decide a position. Iceland versus Ukraine for the playoff spot. And in the end, it would be Ukraine who would prevail with 2 late goals. Group E was pretty much settled like 2 months ago. Spain qualified after a 2-all draw with Turkey in their last game of the window, while Turkey will once more fight for their lives in the playoffs thanks to a 2-0 win versus Bulgaria and Georgia's catastrophic collapse. The Georgians going into this window needed 6 points to even have a chance to keep their hopes alive. They failed right off the bat, losing to Spain, which, fair enough, it's Spain, but then they lost to a Bulgarian side that hadn't won since last year. Group F was all but Portugal's for the taking going into November. In their first match of the window though, an Irish side that badly needed a perfect window had other ideas and slayed the Portuguese 2-0 thanks to a Troy Parrott brace. Now while one number 7 was scoring, the other was elbowing players in the back? Ronaldo was given a red for this, which means he could actually miss Portugal's first World Cup match. But don't worry, literally everyone else besides the Portuguese. CR7's been talking to Donald Trump about that. And some other matters, if you will. Anyways, Hungary earned a narrow win versus Armenia, and after Portugal absolutely demoralized the Armenians to qualify for the World Cup, that meant only the playoff spot remained, and the winner between Hungary and Ireland would claim it. 3 minutes played, Hungary waste no time and take the lead in front of the home crowd. But they quickly shoot themselves in the foot, giving away a penalty, and Ireland equalize in the 14th minute. Now, Hungary back on the attack in the 37th. Varga takes it on the chest, lets it bounce once, and oh my lord. Ireland refused to die though, and once again it's the man of the hour Troy Parrott finding the equalizer in the 80th minute. As it stands though, Hungary would still be the ones to advance, but here come Ireland at the deck.
Scales is up after it. Scales wins the header. There's a chance.
And so, thanks to Troy Parrott's 5 goals in this window, and also his first 5 goals of the World Cup qualification campaign for Ireland, the Irish achieve what many, including their most loyal, thought near impossible. And once more, it is the history of the Hungry. Entering November, the Netherlands held the qualification spot in Group G, with Poland sitting runners-up 3 points behind them. Finland was also still alive, but they could only overtake Poland if they somehow made up an 11-goal differential in a single match. In that one single match though, they lost to Malta. So none of this mattered anyways. Back to the battle for the top, the Netherlands and Poland started this window with a 1-all draw with each other. This pretty much was the end for Poland, as the Netherlands then capped off their campaign with a 4-0 win versus Lithuania to officially qualify for the World Cup. But Polish people, it's okay, because you'll just have to fight through the playoffs for like the 800th time. Group H was real close. Austria was just holding on to the top spot after they picked up their first loss of the campaign versus Romania last window, while Bosnia and Romania were looking to run away with the spot and a berth into World Cup 2026. But before any of that could happen, second and third place would play each other to start this window. Romania quickly went up 1-0, but then reverted back to being Romania, and Bosnia scored 3 unanswered to get a massive win that confirms them at least the playoffs. While Romania not only disappoint their own people, ignore the fact that they've made it through the Nations League, they disappoint the entire globe, because they have destroyed any hopes of San Marino making it to the playoffs now. Austria deleted Cyprus's tiny bit of hope for the playoffs to begin their window, so it all came down to a finale between Austria and Bosnia to see who would book a ticket to the World Cup next year. Bosnia knew only a win would see them qualify, so they wasted no time grabbing a goal early on. However, the Austrians were not about to see their best opportunity to return slip, as Michael Gregorich scores the equalizer and writes his name amongst greats like Matthias Sindelar, as Austria are back in the World Cup for the first time since 1998. Going into this window, Norway was very close to securing Group I, and after a 4-1 win versus Estonia, they all but confirmed a return to the big dance. However, the Italians believed otherwise going into their last match versus Norway. Because the Azzurri would have to beat the Norwegians 9-0 to automatically qualify, they started complaining. Oh, why is it goal difference when it should be head-to-head? It seems pretty unfair if we beat them 4-0 and still don't qualify. Have you ever noticed that CONMEBOL has 100% of their teams qualify for the World Cup every year? Very interesting. I'm just saying, man, you should have no right to speak this way when you can't even score against Moldova for the first 80 minutes. Before the game, though, Holland was asked at a press conference about Inter striker Pio Esposito. Why was he asked this question? Because Italian media is so fucking stupid, okay? I don't know, man. To which he responded, I don't know much about him, to be honest. Maybe the media will come after me for saying this, but if you play for Italy, you have to have quality, and if you play for Inter, you must have it too. that's how it is. With how Italian media just blew this out of proportion, Esposito definitely heard this and responded on the pitch by giving the Italians the lead in the 11th minute. So you know what, fair enough to him. Unfortunately for Italy though, their defense is still anti-Italian, and then Gianluca Mancini ruined everything entirely by being a sex pest. So once again, Norway destroyed the Italians and officially returned to the World Cup for the first time since 1998. Group J last month saw Belgium finally overtake North Macedonia, not because of their own doing, but because of Kazakhstan. But I guess we're underestimating Kazakhstan, because they too would draw with the Belgians. Or maybe Belgium's just shit, either one works to be honest. Not that this really affected Belgium's chances, because their only other game was Liechtenstein, and after a 7-0 win, the Belgians have officially qualified for their 4th straight World Cup. The Welsh also beat Liechtenstein, which put them level on points with North Macedonia, whose only game of the window was against Wales. Both teams were assured playoffs, but with the winner of this fixture being granted a favorable seeding in the playoffs, we would still see the best from each country. What the fuck? England had already qualified out of Group K, so it all came down to the runners-up spot. Albania had a 1-point cushion between them and their friendly neighbor Serbia, so you'd think this playoff spot would be decided like the other groups, right? Absolutely not. Because Serbia still had to play England, who they ended up losing to. So all Albania needed to do was beat Andorra. And that task is honestly easier than getting out of bed. So this will be the first time Albania ever makes it to the playoffs, but I'm gonna be real, I don't really think they care that much about that. They just care about the fact that they eliminated Serbia. And finally, Group L. Croatia began the window with a 3-1 win versus the Faroe Islands, which sees them qualify for the World Cup with flying colors. This result also eliminated the Faroe Islands, meaning Czechia would take on the last playoff spot. Quickly before we move on to the next confederation, let's briefly look at all the teams that will be moving on to the playoffs. Out of Group A, Slovakia finished runners-up while Northern Ireland earned a berth through the Nations League. Group B, we see Kosovo move on as runners-up while Sweden escaped the group, having finished bottom with just 2 points. In Group C, Denmark advanced as runners-up. Group D, Ukraine narrowly edged out Iceland for a playoff spot. Group E, Turkey were basically banished to the playoffs after matchday 1. Group F, Ireland's spectacular window is rewarded with a place in the playoffs. Group G, Poland loves the playoffs. They get to do that again, I guess. Group H, Bosnia finished runners-up while Romania get a ticket through the Nations League. Group I, lol. Lamau. Group J, Wales finished runners-up, and North Macedonia move on through the Nations League. Group K, Albania finished runners-up. And finally in Group L, Czechia finished runners-up. The playoff round is upon us here in African qualifiers. 4 teams remain and only 1 will stand tall and move on to the intercontinental playoffs when this is all over. Quickly though, here's how the round works. We have the semi-final matchups of Gabon vs Nigeria and Cameroon vs DR Congo. And these ties are only 1 leg. Winners of each semi though will move on to the final, and whoever prevails there will move on to the intercontinental playoffs. Going into this round, Gabon, who have never made a World Cup appearance, had the best chance in the country's history. They had an excellent qualification campaign and were going up against an extremely underwhelming Nigerian side that just snuck into this round. Gabon, it is finally time to write in a new chapter in your story.
Alright, so 3, 2, 1, and scammer gets scammed, buddy. That's what you get.
On to the other match, DR Congo versus Cameroon. One was hoping to make it 2 consecutive World Cup appearances, while the other was hoping to return for the first time since they were known as Zaire. In a pretty gritty match though, both teams saw their biggest chances come within minutes of each other in the second half. DR Congo's attempt was stopped in its tracks by the keeper, while Brian Mbeumo was able to free himself of the defense, but missed from point blank. But then, in stoppage time, DR Congo find the winner off a corner thanks to their captain Chancellor Mbemba in his 100th cap for the Leopards. So it all came down to Nigeria versus DR Congo. You could only imagine what warfare was going on social media before this game. The match began with Nigeria immediately on the offensive, and they draw first blood just 3 minutes in. However, the Congolese were not about to see another opportunity slip as they find an equalizer in the 32nd minute. Then came the biggest bombshell of the match. At halftime, Nigeria's Victor Osimhen was forced off due to an injury he had been playing through for the last 30 minutes. And just like that, Nigeria lose the one guy who carried this whole sorry excuse for a national team to this round in the first place. So with the attack now looking less threatening than a puppy, the Nigerian team retreated to parking the bus pretty much throughout the rest of the game. And ironically enough, this was one of the best defensive displays I've seen from Nigeria in probably 5 years. But since nothing could separate the two nations, the intercontinental playoff spot would be determined by a penalty shootout. Players have dreamed of a moment like this, a moment to lead their country to a World Cup. Now was the opportunity for someone to be a hero.
Y'all take it easy. I'm out.
It took until the 4th kick for someone to convert, but DR Congo won't care as they take an early advantage. Needing to make sure this doesn't get out of reach though, Nigeria finally converted on their 3rd attempt. Their keeper then saves DR Congo's penalty, and Onyemaichi returns the favor on Nigeria's 4th attempt. DR Congo quickly make it 2-2 on their 4th attempt thanks to Fiston Maele. Nigeria then make it 3-2 with their final attempt. So now it all came down to debutant Michel Balikwisha to keep DR Congo's dreams alive. And he places that shit in the corner as if he's played 100 times for this country. Sudden death now. Nigeria take the first pen and it's saved. Now all DR Congo have to do is convert this penalty and they will advance to the Intercontinental Playoffs. And up steps the hero of the semis, Chancel Mbemba.
Needing to keep his bottle here. And Mbemba stepping up. He's won it.
Yes! 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 Come on!
Now with Africa out of the way, DR Congo will hope to be one of the 2 nations to qualify for the World Cup through the Intercontinental Playoffs in March. For Nigeria though, after yet another disappointing campaign despite all the individual talent, this will be the 2nd straight World Cup they miss out on. For this failure, the Federation tweeted an apology to the fans and also the president for some reason.
Yes! My favourite football player who has no idea about my existence just scored. I'm going to invest all my time and energy into a random fucking football club. And while I'm at it, I'm actually going to Eastern man.
Also, this isn't African football unless some kind of fuck shit happens. After the penalty shootout, Nigeria's head coach Eric Shell was ready to fight someone from the Congolese coaching staff. Why did he do that? I'll let Eric speak for himself.
Eric, coming towards the end of the game, I could see that you were a bit frustrated with maybe some of the DR Congo staff members. Could you give us an update on what happened there?
During all the penalty session, a guy of Congo did some voodoo.
I love African football. Into Asia, where we have entered the 800th chance round for the remaining 2 nations. The UAE are hoping to end decades of pain to return to the World Cup for the first time since 1980, while Iraq will hope to do to George Bush what Vito Corleone did to Don Ciccio on his return to Sicily. This round is very simple, 2-legged tie, and the winner advances to the Intercontinental Playoffs. The first leg took place in Abu Dhabi, and it would be Iraq silencing the crowd just 10 minutes in. However, the new citizenship merchants acted quick and responded just 8 minutes later. From there, Iraq had a couple very good chances to extend the lead, but kept squandering them. And they nearly paid the price for it as the UAE was a whisker away from heading home a second. Into the second leg in Basra, the Iraqis once again almost threw away the game, but somehow the UAE didn't capitalize. However, the luck finally ran out when at the beginning of the second half, the UAE runs straight through Iraq's midfield and take a 2-1 lead on aggregate. But the Iraqis would not take long to return the favor with a brilliantly executed set piece. And with that goal, momentum starts to shift towards Iraq again. 83 minutes played, Iraq part the seas on the break and it's just the keeper to beat, but the touch is way too heavy. Into the 5th minute is stoppage time now, an Iraqi winger squares it to an open forward, but he skies it over the bar. Now into the 10th minute of stoppage time. This is the last chance in regulation for Iraq, and the ball hits an Emirati player's hand in the box. Penalty to Iraq, and manager Graham Arnold can't even bear to watch. But it's Amir Al-Amari who steps up, and he sends Iraq to the Intercontinental Playoffs. Let's quickly go over all of the countries that have officially qualified for the World Cup, because there are plenty more to add here. Japan became the first non-host nation to qualify on March 20th, 2025. Followed by them was New Zealand on March 24th, 2025. Then you had Iran and Argentina on March 25th, 2025. Into June, Uzbekistan, South Korea, and Jordan all qualified on June 5th. 5 days later, Australia joined them. And on the same day as the Aussies' 6th straight berth, both Brazil and Ecuador qualified. Then on September 4th, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Colombia all qualified through the remaining automatic spots. 1 day later, Morocco qualified as the first African nation. Tunisia joined them on September 8th. Then in October, we had a bunch qualify from Africa. It all began on the 8th with Egypt, which were followed by Algeria the very next day. Ghana qualified 3 days later on the 12th. Cape Verde made history just 1 day later. And then on the 14th, this round of African qualifiers ended with South Africa, Ivory Coast, and Senegal all booking a ticket. On the same day, Asia saw 2 more representatives in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, while while England became the first European nation to qualify for 2026. Then in November, we saw a wave of new entrants. France became the second European team to qualify on the 13th. Croatia followed them a day later. On the 16th, Portugal and Norway booked a ticket to the big dance. 2 more from Europe and Germany and the Netherlands qualified a day later. Then on the last match day of the November window, Belgium, Austria, Switzerland, Spain, and Scotland all qualified out of UEFA. And then later in the day, CONCACAF provided us 3 nations in Panama. So now with almost every confederation done with qualifiers, we have just 6 slots left, and all will be determined through playoff rounds. 4 of those slots will be countries out of UEFA. 16 teams are currently still alive, and they will be split into groups of 4 each. So that gives us 4 paths. In each path, there will be a semi and a final, and whoever wins the final will qualify for the World Cup. In Path A, we have Wales vs Bosnia and Italy vs Northern Ireland. Wales hope to make it 2 straight appearances. Bosnia want to return for the first time since 2014. Italy are hoping not to fail for a 3rd straight time, and Northern Ireland hope to return for the first time since 1986. In Path B, you have Ukraine vs Sweden and Poland vs Albania. Ukraine have not seen the World Cup since 2006, and Sweden want to return after missing 2022, while Poland are hoping to make it 3 straight appearances, and Albania have never qualified for this tournament ever. In Path C, we have Slovakia vs Kosovo and Turkey vs Romania. Slovakia are seeking a berth for the first time since 2010. Kosovo are hoping to make history after becoming a FIFA member only a decade ago. Turkey will want to erase decades of pain and return for the first time since 2002, and Romania hope to return for the first time since 1998. And finally, we have Path D, which has Czechia vs Ireland and Denmark vs North Macedonia. Czechia hasn't seen the World Cup since 2006. Ireland, it's even longer. They haven't seen the World Cup since 2002. On the other hand, Denmark have already made it twice in a row, and they're gonna hope to make it 3 straight. And finally, North Macedonia have never qualified for this tournament. Then the remaining 2 slots will be determined by the Intercontinental Playoffs. Here, 8 teams from numerous continents will be split into 2 brackets. There will only be 1 semi and 1 final because the top 2 best ranked of DR Congo and Iraq are already rewarded a spot in the final. In bracket 1, there's New Caledonia vs Jamaica, and the winner plays DR Congo. DR Congo hope to qualify for the first time in over 50 years. Jamaica are hoping to recover this embarrassing campaign by qualifying for the first time since 1998. And New Caledonia have never qualified for the World Cup, but this is the farthest they've ever gone. Over in bracket 2, it is Bolivia vs Suriname, and the winner plays Iraq. Iraq are seeking a return to the World Cup for the first time since 1986. Bolivia hope to qualify for the first time since 1994, and Suriname has never qualified for the World Cup. But of course, a massive shout out to all our members, including Janos Balas, German Sayu 7, Jeremiah Owusu Ajimang, Django, Anazir Makalankam, Alex Rod, Kentra Gacha, St. Terran, Sylvia Citrus, Cheesebait, Winder Gel, Finn Likes Rugby More, Davox, Supporter Geyser, Wise Orange, Polar Protos, Fun Fan, The Ghostly Owl, Coney Wolves, Leakstab, Mutanai, Apollo, Thrilling ADT13, Los Milos, LeJames Braun, Vecino, Napsai, Money Cash Hose, Quantavious Pork, Lilia Lover, Stewed Monk, Red Yellow, Fuxi, MX Sand, Harry Maguire's Left Toenail, Blaquito, Thierry's Thoughts, Kev C, Dominic Griffin, Kyler Krebs, Mohammed Altanib, Nish, Patrick Barley, Rashford God 5, Raspberry Ale, and Unbroken Persona. If you'd like to become a member on the channel, there'll be a link down below and up in the annotations. You can follow me on Twitter if you want, follow my Instagram if you like, follow me on Twitch because